What, the kids? Okay. Yes, we might. Don't need that. Don't need that in my life. Yeah, I don't like being carless. That's no fun. How fortunate you interact with the local clerk right here at the table. And we're off to the races. Good evening. We will call the September 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the Township Board of the Chartered Township of Meridian to order. First on our agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will all those who are able please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on our agenda is roll call. Will the clerk Guthrie please call the roll?
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie is here. Treasurer DeShane?
Here.
Trustee McCurtis?
Here.
Trustee Sumlin?
Here.
Trustee Trezise?
Here.
And Trustee Wilson is not present at this time. So we have 6 board members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Trustee Wilson did want me to convey to the board and to the public that she will be here in a little bit. She is part of a group that does fundraising, and they fundraised their millionth dollar over the course of their long tenure. So they're having a little celebration, and she will be joining us very shortly. Okay, next up on our agenda is item 4, the presentations. We've got one presentation this evening. It's the 2024 Meridian Township Deer Management Program. And presenting to us this evening is Emma Campbell, the Land Stewardship Coordinator. Welcome. Hello.
Hi. Good evening, Township Board. Thank you for having me today. Oh. Do I control this? Do I press next?
However you want to move it forward.
Oh, this thing, okay.
That works.
I'm not super tech savvy. I am the outdoors person for the township. So my name is Emma Campbell. I am the stewardship coordinator for the township, and within that job also falls the responsibility of managing our urban deer management program. And so we are heading into our 13th year. And so I know some of our board members are newer, so I'm going to just take a little minute to go over the program with this brief presentation. So I kind of outlined, we started in 2010 in response to lots of different things. So deer car collisions, damage to landscape and private property, ecological disturbance and damage within our parks and preserves. There's lots of reasons why deer get overpopulated in urban areas, and one of the biggest is that we build our properties here and then we lose a lot of our natural predators. So there's an off balance that happens at that point. And then they also really love to come into our neighborhoods, and they love our hostas. So we started our program in response to that. It started very small with just 6 or 7 properties, a very small amount of volunteers. But we went ahead with it. And then in 2015, we really got rocked by chronic wasting disease. It was completely rampant in Meridian Township. It was very devastating for the white-tailed deer population. And we actually had the DNR brought in USDA sharpshooters. That wasn't something that the township funded or paid for. It was so bad that the DNR brought in USDA sharpshooters and managed the herd that way. We weren't able to donate meat with chronic wasting disease. We just didn't know enough. We didn't know how long it would persist in the population. So now we kind of fast forward to 2020, and thanks to the funding from the Township Board, we were really able to step this program up to a whole new level. We were probably harvesting around 80 deer a year prior to 2020, which isn't going to make a very big dent in the population. So in 2020, we had enough complaints, we had high deer car collisions, and the Township Board funded more money toward that. And we were able to purchase a walk-in cooler. We were able to start donating meat again, and that just completely changed the game entirely. Now when hunters go out in October, it's warm out. And this is a huge problem across the state with urban deer management and deer management alone, is trying to get those deer to a place. And so we also implemented the police call that year, which now we have done every year since 2020. And that comes in after our archery program. So our archery program runs at the same time the state archery program does, so from October 1st to January 1st of that year. So we have our archery program, and then after that, the police call is implemented in January. And that was brought about to really focus on areas of high deer car collisions. So we're looking at heat density maps and where those occurrences happen the most, and then where the police are able to go in and be able to call deer in the safest possible way for everyone. So since 2020, that's what we've been doing. And so this year we have 67 volunteer hunters from the community. And these are, local dentists, teachers, firefighters, police officers. So we also have township employees as part of that program. And so these are all your local folks going out and putting in over 3,000 hours of volunteer work to complete archery. And so we have 43 properties that are included in that. And then now this year we have 26 private properties that have given us permission. So we also reach out to homeowners and residents. And if it's, a safe space that we can either place an archer or make it part of the police call, we include that private property in our management. We work off of deer management assistance permits, and so these are approved by the DNR. We have a wrap-up meeting at the end of every season, and we go over everything with the Department of Natural Resources and the local state wildlife biologists for deer, elk, and moose. And they help recommend and guide our management numbers. So last year, we were approved for 300 deer to harvest from the township, and this year, once again, we were approved for 300 deer. So between our archery program and our police call, we will fulfill that number. We are really looking closely at several different metrics and factors to how successful we're being. We did a public survey in 2021, which we'd like to do another one coming up soon, and we had over 80% support in the community, which is really great. Most people understand why we are doing this program and what it means, so we're really happy with that. We've had our car deer collisions is a number that the DNR told us, if this is important to you, this is something that you should hinge a lot of your management on. And so we looked at when we had the least amount of incidents, which is in 2020 when people weren't driving around really. And so our goal is to get our deer car collisions down to 100. And last year we were at 97. And that is just based off of state police data. We do recognize people want us to look more into insurance companies, but we're remaining consistent in the data we use. So we've seen a 36% decrease since 2011 in deer car collisions, which is really great for deer and people. So that's some of our success that we can measure. We've also been really happy that we can donate venison. So in the past, we've worked with Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger to donate venison, and last year we donated to 15 or 16 local food banks, and our staff does all of that. Mike Ellis is our DPW staff person who hand delivers all of that venison. So last year we donated over 6,000 pounds locally here, and that's huge, and that's really awesome. It's a very local, sustainable source of protein that we're just really thrilled to be able to donate. So we do feel like we have received fewer complaints in many areas. Of course, there's always going to be high pressure in those neighborhoods that are really packed in, and we just aren't able to get there. Of course, we have to put safety at the top of our program, and we're never not going to be safe in order to get into areas to harvest deer. We are working with MSU again this year, so we brought this to the board last year. That's one of your memos that you have. We started a research project with them last year, and so they're really looking at how ticks relate to the white-tailed deer population, how widespread is Lyme disease, and ultimately they're looking at, can they potentially down the road administer anti-tick medication to wildlife. We are not partaking in any kind of medication, sending out into the township. We're just allowing them to do their research, and so they are putting alfalfa product piles down in certain sites, and there is a pink biomarker in there that's approved by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and is non-toxic, is not actually digested by the deer. It doesn't absorb into the deer at all. It just gives them an idea of where these deer go in the township after they eat that AFP. So it's really interesting. It's great for us. We really want to collect as much data as we can for this program because we want to be making the most scientifically backed management decisions that we can for our deer herd. There is a very fine line. We always think there's so many, they're inexhaustible, and that's not true. You can collapse their population, and we really don't want to do that. We do love deer. We don't want to see all of them go, but we also want to make their herd healthier and happier. And we want to help the residents too deal with some of those issues. So we're really excited to work with MSU again. We're already finding interesting data from them on where ticks are in the township that can carry Lyme disease, and we're seeing interesting information on the home ranges of deer, which I know a lot of residents are always interested in because they feel like maybe they just camp out in their backyard, and the truth is sometimes they do. So we're very happy to be working with them again this year. And we're very, very happy for our volunteers. And so, our volunteers are required to donate their first deer that they harvest. So they have to do that. And then they all have to participate in mandatory training and safety and proficiency tests before the start of every single season. We want to make sure that everybody's going out there as prepared as they can be. They have packets with tons of information and rules and procedures in there for them. So we want to make sure our volunteers are fully equipped and ready to go out and perform a really arduous task. So we're very happy for them. Here's a little more information about our MSU research, but you can find more of that in your memo there. Does anyone have questions?
Trustee McCurtis.
Just real quick, I know you said there is a call of 300 to harvest 300. What is the approximate deer population here in the township?
Yeah, so this is a really common question. It's really hard for us to measure exactly how many deer are in the township. We would realistically have to go out and capture every single deer and mark them to understand fully. We've looked into helicopter surveys, and the DNR has really recommended that those do not reflect the true deer herd. They're very costly. So this is what they've given us this task to really gather all this information on where they are in the township, where they're abundant, where we're seeing the highest deer car collisions. So the DNR, the wildlife biologists, they're the experts, and they estimate that there's about 800 to 1,100 deer in our township. But again, that is not a number that anyone can ascertain to a very specific number because it's very difficult to do that. So that's why we're not changing our harvest quota this year. We feel like we're at a maintenance level. We're seeing our deer car collisions meet that number that we're going for. When we get calls from neighborhoods, we have observations from the hunters, and so we're seeing where there's deer present in high numbers. We're seeing where they're kind of whittling out. We see where there are deer really traveling that often. So that's an answer that's a little complex, but that's all of the information that we're tracking in order to maintain a good management quota for our deer herd. But 800 to 1,100 is what the DNR has estimated to us. Historically, deer are supposed to be at a number of 20 deer per square mile, which means that there's supposed to be about 650 in our township.
Clerk Guthrie and then Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson, and thank you for your presentation and the work that you do with this. In regards to the private properties, is that started from the property owners themselves or the township or a private government partnership where you're looking at where the deer population is and then you assess that these are the private properties that the township needs to go to? How is that decided?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a little bit of both. We did send out letters. We'll be sending out more letters to certain neighborhoods this year. So I think 2 years ago, we sent out letters to see if people were interested in having a hunter assigned to their property. And that's really just opening the door. It's not as easy as that. It's 100% up to the archer or the police who are running the call, whichever, one ends up hunting the property. But it's always up to them whether they can do that or not. I mean, we've had some people who they really want us there, but we just can't do it. So a lot of times, we'll make like a first communication through a letter. I don't ever call people and say, hey, your property looks great. But our hunters are told that, they're people who live in the community. They know their neighbors. A lot of times they're asked, someone understands like they're in the program. Okay. They ask them to check out their property, and then if it's all good, they can be assigned to that area. I will say that our police have done a lot of legwork in acquiring some of those private properties. Some of them are 5 to 10 acres, so that's really great. A lot of people who call us have maybe like a 0.5 acre parcel, and that's difficult. And then in that case, you have to have you have to have the neighbors approving, because you can't just go retrieve a deer on someone's property, and it's not respectful either. It's also against the law, everyone. But yeah, so, when it's that instance, we really need more neighborhood support. And so we're starting to slowly gain that. But again, it just comes down to, we got to make sure that everyone is safe, and we understand the deer population can be really bad for some people, but there's only so much we can do with that. So you're trying very hard, I promise.
Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. The question Trustee McCurtis asked about population, I've been asking that for 8 years now. And one time I got a figure of 10,000. Recently I got a figure of...
Who gave you a figure of 10,000?
I don't remember. It was a meeting
Okay.
around 8 years, up to 10,000, okay? Recently I got a figure of 100 to 200 deer per acre in the township, which would put the population at 3,400 to about 7,000. If you spend any time in neighborhoods, the areas you're not hunting, that number of 800 to 1,000 will not seem reasonable, because they're everywhere in the neighborhoods. And out canvassing the past few months, I heard many comments about the deer having just overwhelmed their backyards, their gardens. And so that would tell me our number is considerably higher. Particularly when you consider a third of the township is not part of our urban service boundary material area, where they can roam more freely there. And I understand the challenge you have of trying to thin the cull in the neighborhood. You can't shoot them. You can't use your normal techniques, but they're out there. And I think the areas you're looking now, parks, land preserves, are really not where they're hanging out, where they're living in the neighborhoods.
I would be interested to see how those people gathered that data that they're talking about, because it's really hard to gather really specific information like that. And that does seem like a really high number. So I would be interested to see how that data was acquired, those numbers that you mentioned. But besides that point, They are, so that's what we're finding is where we're able to manage them, we're seeing them in much healthier populations. We're still seeing them though in some areas. It just depends where it's at. There's properties where we'll back off of it for 2 years because we start to not see deer anymore. And then 2 years later, they're coming back in. So they're smart, they rotate, they change where they're at. Of course, it is gonna be higher in neighborhoods, but this cannot be looked at as just, it's the deer's problem. We have to look into native landscaping. A lot of people put a deer's favorite food out in their yard. And I totally understand that. I'm a huge gardener. I have a huge garden, but I also live next to, 300 acres myself of natural area, and I have all native plants in my yard, and I find that I have very little problems with the deer in my yard. They bed in my yard every night, but they don't seem to eat my garden. And I have heard from residents who say, I've put this native plant in here and it didn't work. And so I do understand that there's high enough pressure where it doesn't always work. I have a fence around the stuff I want to keep, and it's not the prettiest, but we have to understand that when people move here because of the green space. It's incredible the amount of green space that this community has. And if you think about our developments, they're going right onto the land that all of these animals have traversed across for a really long time. And so they're not going to change their mind about where they're going to hang out. And then they're also going to hang out where they have really readily available food and where they do feel safe. And that seems to be neighborhoods right now. And so I've talked to lots of residents. I've heard their frustrations. I've told them to make noise makers and things, and it doesn't work. And so, we're kind of to the point where we're doing everything we can. And I'm not saying that residents aren't doing everything they can, but I do think that there is a part that we can play in that as well. And like I said, it's just, there is a zero distance rule in our township for archery. So, really, you can hunt in your backyard. Not a lot of people want to do that. They have that choice, or they can turn to us to assign a hunter. But again, there's too much to lose if something goes wrong. And so there's just a point where what are we gonna be able to do in some of these areas? And we are certainly always trying to come up with creative solutions. And this year we are thinking of things that we're trying to come up with for some of these properties. We used to not hunt any private property in our program. So now we have 26 to 30 each year. So I'd say that we're progressing, we're evolving to get there for sure. I know that doesn't 100% answer your question, but, we've even looked at at one of the township board meetings, sterilization was brought up, and there's a lot of research that says that that's not effective. We've looked at other options, and we're pretty much doing everything we can. I served on the Deer Management Initiative Committee this year for the DNR, for the entire Lower Peninsula, and nobody is doing what we are doing. And they're really, really struggling with these problems, much more so than we are. So we do need to keep in perspective that we're doing a whole heck of a lot to manage the deer herd, but we do need to keep safety first and foremost.
Thank you.
Other board members with questions?
Just real quick.
Trustee McCurtis.
I'm sorry. When it comes to safety, especially on both the private properties and the parks, how do you ensure the safety? Do you go knocking on doors? The neighborhood, the adjacent properties to both parks and the private properties. How do you?
Yeah, so we're actually going out this week. We send out communication in letters. We also do a press release. We usually do a Facebook post of me talking and being interviewed. I've also been interviewed by news channels about this program. So we really communicate through letters, press releases on our website to our residents. And so everybody who's in a management area or whose property touches a management area receives a letter notifying them that we have these archers out here. We have every single property posted with Be Advised signs at the entrance and throughout the area because our parks and preserves do stay open. That can sometimes make people nervous, But ultimately, when people are still very nervous, they call me, and I spend a lot of time on the phone with people in the fall, talking them through what our program is and the safety measures we take. And a lot of times they feel, almost every time they feel much more comfortable when they get off the phone. Some people still call me and say, is a hunter in yet? Because every hunter has to check in and out every time they go in and out of the field. And there's people who are still just a little too nervous, so they call me and ask me if one of the hunters is out, and I let them know. But really, I think the best part about this program, and we've gotten some flack before from people who say, why isn't it on a lottery? We have a big wait list for the program. A lot of people want to do this. It's a unique recreation opportunity. And the reason we don't is because those hunters know who the neighbors are. They've had to knock on their door. They've had, I always tell them, if you know that you might have a deer run into someone's yard, it's best to establish a connection now so people know who you are. They have to put a sign up in their vehicle as well when they're parked at a location. They have an ID card and everything. So our hunters really know this area. They've been in the program a long time or are a resident. So they know the neighbors and they're establishing that connection that way too. So there's a lot of different little ways we get everyone to know what we go through and what safety measures we take.
Seeing no other comments, thank you very much
All
for your
right, thank you
presentation.
so much.
Next on our agenda is item 5, citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. There are several opportunities for public comment tonight at tonight's meeting, one here at the beginning and one at the conclusion of the meeting. Members of the public who wish to address our agenda or any item not on our agenda may do so at either of those opportunities. Those who wish to address the board must complete a green card and present the card to the board or to a member of our staff who are sitting along the back row here prior to the beginning of the public comment period. When it's your turn, I'll go up to the podium and then let the next speaker know as well that they're on deck to speak to the topics indicated. While it's not required, it is helpful if you can give us your name and address for the sake of our meeting minutes. Citizens are required to limit comments to 3 minutes. An automated system will keep track of the time. Trustee Trezise will help us keep track of that. And there will be a light and beep when your time has expired. Members of the board do value our public's comment and the meeting format and the rules, however, restrict board members from engaging in conversation with commenters or answering questions directly. Questions and concerns may be addressed by board members at a later time, or they could be referred to a member of our township staff to follow up on. Please remember to address all comments to the board and or the board's chair, again, that's me, and not to individual board members or to others in the audience. First up this evening, we have Jane Southwell, and then Peggy Frisch, you are on deck.
Good evening. I'm Jane Southwell. I'm at 5355 Wild Oak in East Lansing. I've been a resident of Meridian Township for, about 60 years. I'm here tonight to bring attention to the neglected maintenance and upkeep over many years of the Riverside Cemetery, and many of you may not even know where that is. It's at the corner, or it's at the intersection of Grand River and Hamilton Roads, and this is a piece of our history. Ed Hodeling, who was a gentleman that spent about a week in 2004 in September going through and documenting names, dates of all the headstones, as many of them as he could. He notes that at the time that I walked this cemetery, it didn't look like it had been raked and mowed. And I find that information, as I've gone up there, pretty true. Just to give you a little history, this area's first settlers settled here in 1839. The earliest burial there at Riverside is 1841. The earliest birth dates on stones are 1783 and 1797. So it's really history. Well-known families that you all know, you've heard the names of Hamilton, Grettenbergers, Hewletts, and Marsh are among the few. Aaron Jones is one of my favorites. He was born in 1841, died in 1908. He has an American flag on his stone. He was 20 at the start of the Civil War. Meridian Township, I really feel, has violated the trust of these folks who bought these lots. They entrusted us with perpetual care. And it doesn't matter that this was purchased 150-plus years ago. How do we solve this problem? Fence in the entire cemetery to preserve and protect. New signage at the main entrance posting cemetery hours. I'd like to find some resources to help clean up the cemetery grounds, as I met with Rob McKenzie, and he said just doesn't have enough help to do that. We need to consult preservationists to do restoration. I plan to get my Southwell ancestors' headstones repaired. Consult with Meridian Historical Village, and I've talked briefly with Patrick Reynolds, who was going to be here tonight, but oh, there he is. Okay, I'd never met him face to face. I spoke with Loretta Stanaway, a leader in preserving Lansing cemeteries, as she toured Riverside this morning with me. She emphasized with research what kind of stories that we would find out about these early settlers that would just amaze us. Samantha, thank you. She took pictures and explored the cemetery with me today, and she's going to be showing some of these. I thank you for allowing me to bring this to your attention. I really appreciate it. I spent my girlhood kind of going through the cemetery, and it's just a piece of history that we need to preserve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I understand there are some additional pictures in addition to the PDF that you've got showing here? Before we go away to another topic.
Sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. That's the old sign that's at the wrong end of the ceremony, of the cemetery. Old fencing. Some of the stones, there was the cemetery flooded years ago before I even moved to Okemos, and they lost a lot of the graves. That's why that plat mark is, or plat lock is the way that it is. The Army Corps of Engineers built up the riverbank, and it's preserved the remaining. It's kind of rough for me to walk, or anybody. The riverside is only fenced part way. It's kind of dangerous. That's a steep down to the river. We just lost a beautiful oak tree that they're trying to clean up, but that was 2 or 3 weeks ago that it went down. And that's the entrance into the cemetery. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Peggy Frisch, and then Ellen Portnoy, you're on deck.
I would want to speak at the end of the meeting.
At the end of the meeting? Okay.
Yeah, does it say that?
Sure does. Thank you. Ellen Portnoy, and then Steve Vagnosi.
Hello, so I'm Ellen Portnoy, and here we are again talking about the senior center. I just discovered that we were going to be on the agenda tonight, so I don't have a whole thing prepared. But I have been reading, and I looked in the packet and saw the communications that have gone on between you and Barbara O'Kelly, who is on the West Coast tonight and couldn't be here, and what is being proposed for the new task force. So obviously, we've just been through a pretty difficult process that was very unpopular with the seniors, and that left a good amount of bad feeling in that community. And we are very hopeful. We know that the senior center has to be replaced, and all of us would be most appreciative of a good effort that is not a one-sided, where we can have input from everybody. So currently, in the memos in the packet, there is a proposition that the new task force would be led by one of the members that was one of the two people that were strong supporters of a particular model that we are not sure that we want. And we are hoping that we could get an independent facilitator, not one that's primarily from us, not one that's primarily from you all, but independent, whose job it is to be able to guide a process that is neutral, that is inclusive, where people end up feeling like they are heard from both sides. And right now, and that would include more than one person from the senior center, which is what I saw in the notes. which would be very unbalanced. So I am here to state that objection to the current way that this new task force is being set up, and to be able to go forward in a way that's more positive, and hopefully we'll find a good replacement for the senior center. And that's really, oh, and I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Ellen Portnoy, and I'm from Okemos. That's all I have to say for tonight.
Thank you very much. Stephen Vagnozzi.
I'm Steve Vagnozzi. I live in Riverwood Park. I've been a resident of the township for about 48 years at various parts. I'm speaking also about the proposed senior center reconstituted task force. Tonight, I am speaking for Barbara Kelly, who's unable to be here, and consider my remarks a combination of things that I've heard from members of the advisory board. One of the concerns is that there's a proposed 9-member task force, of which there's only one representative from the senior center. The seniors feel that they haven't been heard, and structuring the committee this way isn't going to help resolve that. We need to have more than one representative of seniors on this task force. Second, we believe that the task force should select its own chair, as is fairly typically done when I was, for example, when I was on the Transportation Commission. The commission itself selected chairs. I served for one of the terms. Other people served other years. The most important thing is that we be very scan a wide net, looking for different types of options, from building from scratch, or looking at an inventory of spaces that are available vacant in the township that could be done, that could be utilized. The key thing we have here is that we have the 4 years left for the senior center to be at its current location until it's no longer feasible due to construction.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other green cards for this public comment period. Any other members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 6:37. Next up is item 6, our township manager report. For that, we have interim township manager Tim Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and members of the board. Couple of things for you this evening. First and foremost, I hope everyone is well aware that the MSU to Lake Lansing Phase 2 of the trail is open. I saw a lot of people crossing Grand River this weekend to get from Phase 1 to Phase 2. So this is a testament to long-range planning. And not to toot planners' horns everywhere, but this is an idea that the township had over a decade ago, and we worked at it, and we worked at it, and we worked at it, and now we are on to the last phase that Deputy Manager Opsmer's crew is currently working on designing. So hopefully we get under construction for next year. So if you haven't been out there, I'd highly advise you to go check it out, and the official ribbon cutting is this Friday. Along the same vein, the project, the 2025 road projects that we pulled forward because we've had such a successful year on the road program are underway now and are expected to be done by the end of the month. And so we will actually be ahead of schedule for next year, which is the first time we can say that. Deputy Manager Opsmer and Director Clark in my stead, have been working diligently on pushing forward the Hazlet Village Square project, as I haven't been able to give it as much love as I'd like to, and we are making progress. I want to assure the public that we are still shooting for to get that project in the ground this year, and we, knock on wood, like where we're at. Just briefly, would like to mention that Sergeant McCready retired today. Today was his last day. He was in to purchase his badge, which apparently is the process as it's been explained to me. We're going to look into that because that doesn't seem like a lot of money to for us to be able to absorb when someone retires after that many years of service. But we wish him all the best in his retirement. And for just a minute there, we were almost fully staffed for like a couple hours after we swore in our new officer who was sworn in today. And lastly, I just want to point out to the members of the public, you are in very capable hands with our fire department. They're currently going through their physical fitness test for the year, and I joined them this morning. And I can tell you that I set a very, very low bar for them all to pass over top of. But I did pass, to be clear. It's quite the challenge, and it's mind-boggling to see them put the same amount of gear on that I had and just kind of walk through things that I was really struggling with. So everyone is in great hands with our fire department. They'll take good care of us if we need them to. That's all I have right now. Thank you very much.
Board members, do you have questions for Interim Manager Schmidt? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is item 7, board members' reports of activities and announcement. Any board members with activities and announcements to report? Trustee Sunland.
Okay, so I had the privilege to attend the convention 2024 last week. A convention gives a space to connect as local government leaders and mayors and managers and municipal attorneys and others, and we share opportunities to learn about what's happening in each of our communities, and where we're heading for the future. And there was a lot of focus on multiple sessions on artificial intelligence and how we can use this technology as a tool for the good. And we're talking about thriving communities are exploring success holistically, bridging the gap between individuals and living in the community. The focus areas of pursuing a thriving community are lifelong learning, trust and belonging, arts and culture, financial security, sustainability, infrastructure, and public health and safety. So it was an excellent convention. I did attend a council manager relationship workshop, and it was very enlightening. Just we currently have a vacancy as the township manager, so, it struck home. And there was an emphasis on placemaking. And then the city of Houghton won the contest for their town and their thriving community. So anyway, it was an excellent convention, and it was well attended, and it was a great experience.
And that was the MML convention, correct? Michigan Municipal League.
Michigan Municipal League.
Fabulous. Thank you. Other board members? Supervisor Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. Guess what? It's National Voter Registration Day. I know everybody's excited about it, and I am sure that the numerous voter registration applications that we received were from our efforts and not any announcement by Taylor Swift. I am sure that there was zero influence on people to submit their voter registrations. We received around 150 voter registration applications since that announcement, so that's great. It's fantastic. I love it. It's a lot of work on our end, a lot of duplicates, but that's okay. We go through each and every one of them and make sure that everyone's processed, and if there's any questions, we make sure that everyone's A-okay to be voting this November. So if you need to check your voter registration status, you can go to michigan.gov/vote. You can contact the clerk's office if you have a question. There are a number of people who do have difficulties using the online portals through the state of Michigan, and so we do have a number of people who contact our office, and so you can give me a call. Our information's on the website, clerk's office at meridian.mi.us. We have 13,000 voters who are on our permanent mail ballot list. We have almost 170 overseas voters currently. Around 4,700 voters are on the old absentee voter list that we are sending permanent mail ballot applications to as we speak. We have around 34,000 registered voters to date. And absentee ballots, the number one question we get asked, absentee ballots will be mailed on September 26th, so you should receive it within a week. After that, we get numerous phone calls about that. So please help spread the word. We do not have them at our offices yet. They have not been delivered. And so, but as soon as they are, we will prep them and we will get them out to everyone on the list, those 13,000 voters currently, and anyone else who's added. And that's my report. And it's an exciting time to be clerk. It is.
Other board members. Thank you, Clerk Guthrie. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor. Just a reminder to the public that Saturday is our fall recycling day at the Meridian Mall, our annual event. It's moved from Kennewa or Chippewa. It's been held in the past. It's at the mall this year. They'll take almost all electronics, even including TVs and computers, dehumidifiers, other small appliances like that, even refrigerators, small refrigerators. They will also take clothing, gently used clothing, particularly coats. It's part of the annual coat drive that the township is participating with. So Saturday, 9 to 1 at the Meridian Mall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other, Trustee Trezise?
Yeah, I was deferring to Mr. DeShane to mention the Heroes Luncheon last week put on by the Ashwood Okemos Rotary Club, and it was very well attended. Our two chiefs made presentations that were very well written and very well delivered. It seemed like it was a larger group than you were expecting. And, I hope the foundation raised some good money from it.
Okay. Anyone else? Trustee Sunland.
Yeah, I just have a question. So we have the one day dedicated to, taking in your stuff. So how are we collecting that and how do we disperse it? I'm just curious.
Sorry, you're talking about the recycling day?
Yeah.
Treasurer DeShane, you want to take that one?
We hire a company that comes in and takes most of the equipment, most of the electronics off-site, and they recycle it the best they can. And then another group will be handling some of the coats and other clothing gifts or clothing donations that are made. But there's a firm that we hire. Leroy Harvey is the best person to ask that question to. Leroy is our longtime environmental coordinator. This will likely be his last recycling days. He is set to retire sometime in the next year. Well, Miss Leroy, he's been a real institution here, and recycling is become part of the fabric here in Meridian Township, in large part due to Leroy's leadership on that over the past 20 years.
Yeah, I'm going to miss the event. I have a good friend that's celebrating their birthday, so I was just curious as to whether there are other times that we could donate the articles that we're trying to get.
We do have our recycling center up off of Lake Drive, and they have hours posted, and it's open 6 days a week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sunland. Anyone else? I'll close by saying I attended the DDA meeting on September 9th. It's my first time getting to meet with them since becoming supervisor. They are working on some signage in the downtown area in Okemos. So that should be coming in the not too distant future. This is replacing the sign that was taken down when the bridge was replaced. Some pretty cool design options. We're looking forward to seeing that project get accomplished. And there are some additional cleanup efforts going on with some of the businesses that have moved on. So we're helping to keep our downtown nice. Nice. Seeing no other board members with comments or announcements, we'll move on to item 8, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
So moved.
Treasurer Shane moves. Seconded by trustee McCurtis. All those, any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda passes. Next up on our agenda is item 9, our consent agenda. On our consent agenda this evening, we have our communications with the board, the minutes from our September 3rd, 2024 regular meeting, the bills, a disposal of surplus equipment, resolutions in support of National Voter Registration Month, and commemorating Constitution Week. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening?
I move.
Moved by trustee Trezise,
Second.
seconded by trustee McCurtis. Any discussion on the consent agenda? I think Clerk Guthrie, did you want to speak to your 2 resolutions that were on there?
Well, not really, but
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
no, I mean, I kind of already said it's an exciting time of year. It's National Voter Registration Day. It's National Voter Registration Month. We do have an influx of people. We did participate in a voter registration drive today. We received at Okemos High School and received over a dozen voter registrations, pre-registration, so that was pretty exciting. So we just continue to step up our efforts to encourage people to register to vote, and I know our communications team has been working with us on getting some information out, and they have a very funny reel that catches your attention on Instagram. So if you're not on Instagram, you should go there and see what Meridian Township did, and it's pretty fantastic. I thought Rachel did a fantastic job. I stared at it, just waiting to see I'm not even going to tell anybody what they did because you need to go see what they did, and it's pretty fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was great. You could be like appalled, but it grabs your attention. They're doing good work in that department. And then, I mean, obviously, it's Constitution Week. It's something that the clerk's office gives an oath to with others practically every day to abide by the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of this state. So it's something that we hold dearly. And that we practice on a regular basis. So something that I encourage. I don't think people often go to the Constitution and take a look at it and read at it. You learn about it in high school, and then pretty much that's it. So, and maybe you take an oath to abide by it in a future career. So I just encourage people to take a look at it.
Thank you very much.
So thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the approval of the consent agenda does require a record roll call vote. Clerk Guthrie, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee McCurtis?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland? Yes. Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 10, questions for the attorney. We have none. Item 11 is hearings. We have none. Next up on our agenda item is agenda item 12A, the 2025 township budget. And here we have interim manager Schmidt, also known as Director Schmidt.
I wear
here to
many
talk
a
about the budget.
Thank you very much, board, for your faith in me over these last months, especially as we've gone through this budget process. I could not have done it without the M team, so thank you all. Again, special thanks to Carol Hassey, who answered a lot of silly questions from me. The budget adoption in front of you this evening does have the changes made that were requested by the board at the last meeting, and I'll go through those briefly. Then I have one other thing I'd like to add. The municipal bathroom renovation was removed from the capital projects fund. The capital projects fund will make a $280,000 transfer to the local roads program to continue that investment. The MERS payment of $537,000 was added to the pension stabilization funds while making an additional MERS payment next year. The clerk's budget for 25 was updated on the election side to match the 2023 budget, assuming the potential for a special election next year. That brings our potential budget surplus down to $40,000 next year. The language about the police restricted fund was struck. That was a miss in the original draft. And the safety enhancement line item in the CIP was then moved from 28 to 27 at the request of the board. The two items I want to touch base on a little more briefly are the Economic Development Fund and the Community Needs Fund. And I've brought in the big hitters this evening. If we do have specific questions, I do have Director Amber Clark and Human Services Specialist Katie Love. So from the Economic Development perspective, Economic Development Corporation Fund perspective, that they have essentially become the fiduciary for a number of events over the years. And so a lot of that is if they fundraise it, they spend it. If they don't fundraise it, they don't spend it. And so what you're seeing is roughly the same as what we've used in years past as the rough estimate. And as we move forward with Juneteenth or an event of that nature, the money that's fundraised is what actually shows up in the budget, and then the money that's spent is what comes out in the end. There are two things that sort of come out of that every year. The Chinese Lunar New Year donation has been in there for about a decade at the direction of the board. And the money, the revenue is from Bircham Hills, and that's long-standing bond-related issuance that they pay us $10,000 annually, and that is the only source of revenue for them. So the EDC will really only spends what they take in. Any additional funding of that, they recognize that they have very limited resources beyond that and don't have the ability to really spend more money. Community Needs is a little different. Community Needs was a relatively small fund prior to COVID. During COVID, the board made a substantial transfer into the Community Needs Fund to start building up the capacity there. And that's why you see them spending that down, because there's really no reason for us to be sitting on a fund balance there if the need exists. And so under Human Services Specialist Love, we've begun to transfer and build up the donation side of the fund so that when that fund balance has been spent from the COVID transfer, we have the donations coming in to be able to sustain what she's built. And so that's where that fund is in a bit of a transition, but we are getting to the point where we hope the donations can sustain that fund in the long term. But again, if we get to a point where the fund balance is depleted from that COVID transfer and the donation level has not risen to a level that we'd see, we would have a conversation with the board 2 years from now, 3 years from now, as to do we make a general fund transfer or do we pare back the outgoing? And so we're comfortable with both of those funds at this point because they're similar but moving in different directions. EDC fund is going to be pretty flat and stable as long as they don't have a major project come in. Community services really should be spending down that fund balance if there's a need in the community and finding replacement dollars where we can. And so that's where we're at. The one thing I do want to point out that was brought to my attention late today, actually not late today, early today, but late in the process, was one change to the fee structure on page 17 of the budget. There's a line item for a cemetery deed buyback. This appears to have been added in 2021, I believe. But we actually don't have a process for that currently, nor do we anticipate one in the near future. So at this point, we just recommend striking that line item from the fee structure. That's all I have this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And like I said, I do have my brain power here this evening to help me out as necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Board members, any questions on the budget based on what the presentation we just received? Procedurally, if it is the pleasure of the board to make any changes, I would ask that we make them individually via motion so that we can keep track of that as we go along. The interim manager has presented us with one such change and revision that he'd like to see and staff would like to see made to eliminate some confusion. Are there any board members who would like to make a motion in that regard? Trustee Trezise.
Yes, I'd make a motion to add another employee in the utility collections area, supervisor for utilities.
Okay. Do we have any support for that? Treasurer DeShane.
I would support that motion.
Okay. Any discussion?
I would say that our collections and utilities has been rocky for a while. I think everybody acknowledges that. We have some antiquated equipment from years past that we're trying to replace. And I believe that this position would allow us to catch up and probably pay for itself within a year to a year and a half and ongoing by improving our processing with the utility billing. I don't know what the amount we're talking about though is, and that probably should be in the motion. Do you have a number?
We do not. That is something that we're going to have to develop
Okay.
So I think my recommendation is, to the board here is certainly if the desire is to put it in the budget, please make it known now.
Let's put it in the budget and we'll have a budget amendment to fund it as appropriate when the numbers are available.
We will bring that forward. If the board would like us to proceed with, at post haste here, we will put this together relatively quickly and bring forward a budget amendment for this year still. Alternatively, if this is something that the board is okay waiting until 2025, we can address that in the first quarter budget amendment of 25. I leave that up to the board.
Personally, I will leave that up to the experts in the building department as to the urgency and the speed with which you wish to proceed. Starting early, we may have the position in place early, but I will leave that up to you and Mr. Opsimer to figure out how you want to do that.
As the current utility billing boss, I will get right on that, and we will bring a plan forward to you post haste if this is part of the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, Treasurer DeShane?
I agree with Trustee Trezis's comments. We'll leave it to staff to determine this appropriate salary, and hiring this person now rather than later makes sense. I think it'll pay, the person will pay for itself well within a year, probably a few months. The two of the hardest jobs in the township building are the two utility billing bookkeepers. They work immediately next to the treasurer's area, and people call up and they've got questions and they've got concerns, and can often be argumentative about their water consumption. And it's a very challenging job. And having a third person helping with the phones and a third person supervising the other two, coaching them, helping them, assisting them, providing them with good information will be, I think, key to keeping the people in place. We've had a lot of turnover in that department over the past few years, and also helping to handle the deluge of phone calls they get already. We're looking at some significant utility billing increases in 2025, and those phones are going to be lit up again for quite some time, and they're going to need to be prepared for that. So having this person in place before those new rates go into effect, I think is pretty important. But I think it's an excellent idea. It's a good add-on to the budget. It will pay for itself. We will. I'm sure we'll be happy with the results from this person. I'm sure you'll get the right person in place as well.
Okay. Other board members? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. So the motion was to add a supervisor utilities person for next year. In the discussion, I heard Treasurer DeShane say right away. So I just want to be clear with my minutes that this is a motion for 2025, that there's not an expenditure this year, or there is.
Sure.
I want to be clear with what the motion is and the support before I.
So what's before us this evening is the 2025 budget. I guess what Manager Schmidt was asking is if the board wishes to move faster on this, we have our 2024 budget, which we've already passed, which we may have to amend. And down the line, once we have the numbers for what 2025 will actually be, we'll have to amend the budget again for that, the 2025 budget. So for this motion, it is on amending the 2025 budget to include another authorized position for a utility billing supervisor.
Thank you.
What I can understand from Trustee Trezis.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Did I capture that correctly?
We understand.
Okay. So I guess the question, well, did you have any other further comments? Any other board members with comments on that topic? Or thoughts on the on the general concept of starting earlier as opposed to waiting until 2025? well, I'll add my thoughts, which are, I think that Treasurer DeShane is correct, that we're likely to get even more calls after a rate increase. And as meters begin to, continue to fail. My thought would be the sooner the better. If we can find a way to include that in the Q4 budget, if we have the time to do it, let's find a way to do it. Any other discussion? See, Trustee Wilson, welcome.
I'm sorry, I am late. I was at another event. Did we have any discussion about the cricket, the allocation for the cricket?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, thank you.
So then the question before us is on the motion to amend the budget to add one authorized position, a utility billing supervisor. I don't think we need a roll call on an amendment. We'll use it for the final one.
Correct.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have amended the budget in one way. Any further amendments to the budget at this time or discussion? We had Trustee Trezise.
I believe the suggestion to remove the line item for the fees for the buyback of cemetery plots should also probably be a motion to amend to remove that line item.
Are you willing to make
I
that
am
motion?
making that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded by Trustee Trezise and Trustee McCurtis to strike the cemetery buyback fee from the 2025 budget. Any discussion on this topic?
No, if we don't have it in place and we don't have a system in order to implement it, it seems rather disingenuous to have a program that we can't operate. It's not to say that may not be something that wants to be developed or needs to be developed in the future, but at present, putting a line item in there with fees for something we can't deliver just seems like a problem.
Trustee McCurtis?
No, I agree wholeheartedly, especially if we don't have a system in place for it. To be candid, it'll be a waste of time to have this in the books, so.
Okay. Other thoughts? Seeing none, the question before us is on striking the cemetery buyback fee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Any other discussion on the budget? Those were the two items that were mentioned earlier. Trustee Wilson, you had some questions?
I did. In that, I don't recall receiving an explanation. There was going to be some further review of the fee that of the RFP that Parks and Recreation wants to go out for cricket and a cricket field and the amount.
Yeah, so my apologies. I thought the way we left it was that we would end up doing that RFP in the new year and circling back with the amount because this was just our best estimate based on the current understanding of it. And so then we'd have to make a go, no go in the future based on once we have more detail of that. Unless Director Wazinski has anything to add.
Doesn't answer with this budget.
Good evening, Board. No, Manager Walsh, that's how I understood it as well. So we just don't have enough information.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh.
I might not be there.
I will say, it's funny you bring it up. I did get a text from someone who was at Towner this weekend. And they were playing cricket at Towner this weekend. So the demand is clearly there. We just need to figure it out. And so I think that's probably our best bet is that candidly, we probably do it very early in the year, get the RFP out while it's still not construction season and we're all crazy. And then have that conversation with the Parks Commission and the board once we have a better sense of what it's going to take.
All right. Thank you.
Trustee Trezise.
So my question, is that item still in the budget or is that deleted?
No, that is still in the budget. It is a Parks millage
All right.
funded
Amend
item.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's sort of a placeholder, a
Yes.
large placeholder at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll add to that only that I did notice that there was a state appropriation last year or the year before for the construction of a cricket field in another community. I think it was Troy. And so the legislature has gotten used to helping out in some cases with the construction of that. May be worth poking at our state legislators and seeing if they'd be willing to go to bat to sponsor something like this, if that's in the general strategy of the go-forward plan here. Other discussion or questions on this topic? Clerk Guthrie.
I just want to note for the record that trustee Wilson did arrive at 7:03 PM and did participate in those two voice votes. So they were 7-0 each, just for the record, and to help out our minutes person when they type up the minutes.
Thanks, minutes person.
Yes.
All right. Seeing no other discussion on the township budget, we come finally to the roll call on the budget. Clerk Guthrie, would you please call the roll?
I believe you still need an actual
Oh, I'm sorry.
motion.
Wow, I'm skipping ahead.
As amended, yeah.
As amended, whoever would like to make that motion. Trustee Wilson.
Move to adopt the resolution approving the 2025 recommended budget with the changes discussed by the board at the September 3rd, 2024 budget public hearing and the amendments made at the September 17th, 2024 meeting.
Support.
Supported by trustee Trezise. Now, any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will please call the roll.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee McCurtis?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much. That's the first motion I've missed totally, so.
You get
Tonight.
it.
All right, the next item on our agenda is item 12B, the Township Manager Review Process. This is one that I have been working on in conjunction with Director Tiethoff to help us develop a new process and procedure for evaluating the township manager that includes anonymized employee feedback that the board would receive prior to completing their evaluation. And so in the packet this evening are two items. The first being the procedure document, which is in my lovely outline format. I did include updates to this, brief wording updates to reflect a couple of the changes that were requested at our last meeting. And specifically, the notion that it may not be possible to rotate every 4 years in each bargaining unit, depending on employee turnover and what have you. And also specifying that it is indeed employee feedback, not employee evaluations of the township manager, that the board is the sole arbiter of managerial review. In addition, the second attachment is the Township Manager Performance Evaluation Form. This is one that Director Tiethoff has been working on, and I thank her for her diligent work in putting this together and getting this all ready, prepared for us. There are a couple of narrative items that we had spoken about more recently since this has reached the packet. And so I am going to ask that we delay the approval of the manager review process from this meeting, one meeting further, to allow us to update one more time the manager review form, the sample form, to include a couple of narrative items that were left out. So if it's the pleasure of the board to do so, I'd ask that we table this resolution until our next meeting, which is October 3rd, 2nd?
First.
October 1st. It's October 1st, yes.
Oh.
If you would indulge us in having a little patience on that item, that would be appreciated. So that is the broad strokes. If you'd like to discuss the procedure or the form as it is now, that would be fine too. I think it probably would be wise to hold off until we see it in its final format, if that's all right.
So you would like a motion to table?
To table until our October 1st meeting, yes, please.
I will,
Do we need a motion to table, or do we just not act on it? And
It's on the agenda. I think perhaps it might not be the worst idea to make it official.
all right.
Trustee Wilson.
I move to table the township manager review process and the manager review form to the October 1st, 2024 meeting.
Support.
Moved by Trustee Wilson, supported by Clerk Guthrie. Any discussion? Oh, no, it's non-debatable. I'm sorry. Ha! I'm catching on. All those in favor of the motion to table, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate the indulgence, and sorry for making you read an incomplete form in this packet. We'll get it ready for you. Next up on our agenda is item 13A, which is the board rules, policies, and procedures update. Clerk Guthrie, you've brought this before us. Would you like to give a short presentation on it?
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. At the April 16th Township Board meeting, the Township Board approved a policy work group that includes Trustee Trezise, myself, the clerk, and an HR director, Tehoff. And so we have met frequently since that time. We've had several meetings to review the personnel policy and the board policy manual and the board rules, policies, and procedures. And so we first tackled the personnel policy, which I won't elaborate on this evening, as that personnel policy that we reviewed is in front of the township attorneys, and they are reviewing that in accordance with labor law and language related to that. And so that will come back to the board once the attorneys have reviewed it. So in regards to the board rules, policies, and procedures in the board policy manual, what we did was we took the two different documents that were out there related to how the board functions with staff to put together packets, agendas, minutes, and the relationship that the board has with staff and the manager for day-to-day operations of the township, and the specific relation of the supervisor in regards to that, and the treasurer and the clerk in regards to being department heads, and also elected officials. And so we took from the rules and procedures document that is quite old, as you can see on here, and the board policy manual. It was only those sections of those documents that we put into a new, refreshed board rules, policies, and procedures document. The information that we left off was the end goals statements that you're probably familiar with seeing in the board policy manual as part of policy governance, and the directives for the township manager that we sent, that HR has in their possession to work with on possible inclusion in a future document for whoever the future township manager is. And so we thought that it would be better served to have the directives of the township manager out of the board policy manual and into an actual contract with the future township manager. We didn't think it really had a place in the board policies, rules, and procedures document. So in the refreshed, revised, updated board policies, rules, and procedures document, the highlighted items are the items that were changed after we combined those two documents together. So where you see, for instance, on page 168 of your packet where it's highlighted, at the very top where it has the preamble and the vision statement and the mission statement, the old vision statement and mission statement were still in the document, not the adopted one. So we added the current vision statement and mission statement, and then you can see the highlighted areas where we added text into the document. And then where we made recommendations for text that we thought should be eliminated from the document, you'll see that those sections are stricken and highlighted in yellow as well. I did have the board policy rules and procedures document. I started highlighting everything in blue that we were transferring over to the new document, but basically the entire document was highlighted in blue by the end of it because we made sure that we were including all of that information and transferring it. So that is what is before the board this evening. We did also meet with the interim township manager, Tim Schmidt, for his feedback. We also met with the executive administrative assistant for the township manager, Michelle Prince. And we may have met with a couple of other staff members. I can't recall. And then we met with the supervisor as well, and we did request feedback. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. I don't know how the board would like to proceed, taking a look at this, if you have any questions, or if you want to go page by page, or if Peter, if trustee Trezise, he was at each one of those meetings, and so was HR director Abby Tioff, and they gave a tremendous amount of feedback and contribution to the changes that were made and the updates that were made. And so it wasn't just me, they were massive contributors to this project. And so I don't know if they would like to say something as well to add to it, or their perspective.
Thank you. Trustee Trezise.
Sure. This was a very collaborative and enjoyable project. The person that carried the load for most of the revisions and preparation and consolidating is Clerk Guthrie, and I really appreciate her work on this. Much of what we were trying to do was to simplify some language, clarify some language, so even when it shows a yellow, it probably was something from another document that we're trying to restate in a more sensible way. There were areas of redundancy that we took out. There were whole sections that seemed to be inappropriate in a policy manual for the board because it applied mainly to employees and the manager. So, I mean, it was a long, I don't want to say tedious, but detail-oriented discussion, and I do appreciate the expertise and the wisdom of Director Titoff, who was an essential part of this process. And I don't claim it's perfect. I don't think Clerk Guthrie or Abby can thinks it's perfect, but it's a jumping off point, and we would anticipate and expect and hope for any suggestions from the rest of the board. We think this is a way to simplify what we're looking at and to guide the functioning of the board. But it's not our choice, it's all of our choices. So as far as removing some of the end goals and all that stuff that was in the old format, that was based on a different operational process that was used at the time. It's not necessary, but it would not be inappropriate to revisit the goals, the vision in a document that is in 2025 as opposed to 2017. They usually need to be looked at every 3 or 4 or 5 years, and It would be worthwhile doing that because most of those end statements came from about 2000, wasn't when that was adopted? So there's some updating that could be done there, but we felt that was a community project and a whole board project, not a subcommittee. So that's how we got where we got.
Thank you very much. Director Tiethoff, was there anything you wanted to add as a member of the committee?
Everything.
No, it's just been a pleasure being part of the process.
No, that's what we
Like
brought
Peter
in.
said, it's
It's
been
from
very
another-
rewarding and enjoyable to walk
Coming
through the
out,
documents.
what's going on,
And I
is
look
stuff
forward
that's
to
closed.
Thank you.
This is staying.
Yeah.
All right. Board members, any discussion on the document before us? Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for the work you did on this. A lot of time went into this, and it shows. It's good to have these policy updated, and thank you for that. A question for you, under board policy and code of conduct, it doesn't address ethics in particular. Are we assuming that we have an overall ethics policy that applies to all board members and staff? For example, there's no discussion here of accepting gifts from outside vendors. So,
I would like, if you don't
Please,
mind.
yeah, please.
So in the personnel policy, we discussed ethics and we discussed the non-acceptance or acceptance of gifts. And the personnel policy is a document that board members, elected officials, and appointed officials all have to adhere to the personnel policy. And so those ethical statements and those types of items are in that personnel policy.
okay.
It might be something that's good to refer to in this document, that the ethics standards of the personnel policy for the township are applicable and will be followed by elected members of the
Right,
township
because
board.
it's not referenced at this point.
Yeah, it should be referenced. It's a good catch.
Yes, thank you.
The other thing right off this, item 2 under board members' comment, members must avoid conflict of interest with respect to their fiduciary responsibility. I think we could say that differently, or say more, their fiduciary responsibility to the residents of Meridian Township. It doesn't say who the responsibility is for. They might think the fiduciary responsibility is to themselves. We should say who that responsibility is to. The other edits are good. It's a cleaner document now. I appreciate the clarification on things. What I would suggest we do this, and for the revised personnel policy, is we add a signature page at the end. So every time a board member becomes a board member, they get a copy of the document, they sign it, and it goes in their file. So we have proof that everyone has read it and adheres to it and signed it. I mean, the reason this comes up is I've been appointed to a county committee, and ethics rules were thrown right at me at the beginning, and they want a signed copy that CATA does the same thing. Here's our rules, read it, and give us your signed document that you acknowledge it, and we'll follow it.
Yeah. Good idea. Other discussion points? Trustee Wilson.
Help me to understand, the yellow sections are going to be under further review?
Those are,
What's highlighted in yellow?
those are the changes that we made from the 2 previous documents. So those were areas that we found that were either lacking, that wasn't present. So the yellow highlighted areas that don't have any changes are items that we added to further clarify. The ones that have a strike through it, and then you also see a highlight without a strike, are changes that we made.
I would suggest, I have a few comments. I would suggest that we get a clean copy so that we can see what the final document might look like. That would be really helpful because it's so challenging to read this with colors and strikeouts and so on. So I would suggest if we could make that available to board members, that'd be great. I agree with trustee Trezise that the vision statement and mission statement, which are basically identical, need to be reviewed. All you've added is some language about some specifics in a vision statement, but to my mind, that is not what a vision statement is. A vision statement is to get engagement with whoever falls under this purview that this is really where we're going. This is the concept of where we're going, and I think that needs some work. I looked at the first sentence under Rule 1, authority of the board, and it made no sense to me. It's highlighted in yellow. And it says, members must have loyalty to the owners.
I think that the terminology from an earlier document, and owners refers to citizens, and it probably should be changed to the citizens of the residents of the township.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue the whole statement needs to be changed because it goes on with unconflicted by loyalties to staff, other organizations, and any personal interest as a consumer. This makes no sense to me. So if we could take a look at that, that would be important.
Okay.
Perhaps the people of Meridian Township, something like that, and then strike as a consumer.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
any personal interest.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, I've lost my page. So there are a few other things, but what will make it much easier for us to digest, I think, is to get a clean copy of what you would like to see as the final document, and we can have some additional discussion on what that looks like and where we would make any changes.
It's fair.
Thank you.
We just threw it here for discussion.
Sure,
We're asking for
absolutely.
input.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's great. And that number one was one that we struggled with, in that rule number one. But we left it there because it was in the document, and there were a lot of things that were easier for us to change and make sense. This one we struggled with, and so we completely agree with you. It's confusing. It needs better wording for sure.
Or not have it.
And then the
Doesn't make sense.
mission and vision statement, those two were part of the rebranding process that the township did, that they adopted. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I remember not agreeing at that time with those statements as well. And so I don't know if that's something that the board would like to keep in there because that is what was passed, and then in the future change it, or if that's something that the board would like the policy review committee to make a recommended changes for mission and vision statement when we come back to the board. Or if that's a whole separate topic.
I believe that's a whole separate
Yeah.
topic.
It
I
is.
think so.
Okay, thank you.
It's really important,
Yes.
and that's why I don't think we should take a statement that was made 7 years ago. These to me, not that they don't apply, but they're not directed the way a mission and vision statement should be.
So your recommendation is to delete both the vision and the mission statement?
No, I would not delete them, I would restate them as to what our vision and mission is in 2024.
However, we can pass this and then take up a revision to that.
That's what I'm thinking, because
Okay.
I think to revise the vision and mission statement is not something a subcommittee of this board can do.
I agree.
I'm opposed to you, so it needs a broader input, not just township officials and electeds and employees, but the public.
Yeah.
So we'll leave these in as a placeholder now with the idea that some long-term planning with regard to these can hopefully happen in the near future.
Okay. I've got a couple of thoughts. I agree with about the owner's statement. That one was weird. I flagged that as well. Item 2B, failure to disclose may result in disciplinary action.
Yeah.
A haunting statement. There is no reference to what said disciplinary action may be or what's even available as a board trying to discipline its own members who are accountable to the people, not usually.
Right.
So at the very least, we may want to consider what that looks like and/or find another way to say it without saying it. Because I don't know, I honestly don't know what's legally allowable.
I don't either. Now, it may be best to just leave it at the end of, must disclose conflicts
Yes.
and not talk about discipline, because there are discipline processes through state government to remove people from office if necessary.
Sure.
And that was our thinking here, that the board might, as the MSU Board of Trustees did, recommend to the governor to remove someone from office. That is about the only discipline that I know of that we might have. And that's pretty radical.
That takes a lot.
What if we change that to may result in censure from the full board?
I can get rid of that whole sentence and just say that member must disclose the conflict of interest prior to board deliberation.
I think
That's what it says.
well, it says shall disclose.
Permission.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think,
no, that's,
I think shall or must
Or
are essentially the same.
yes, they are.
I think the remedies are available in state law. I think we can probably strike that sentence and be just fine. On the next page, item 8. In order to control legal fees incurred by the township, members shall request access to the attorney through the manager or township operations and township supervisor for board needs. We may want to look at adding some additional nuance to this. I don't want to be the barrier, or whoever is in this seat, to the clerk asking our lawyers about election-related items, for example, or the treasurer asking our attorneys about financial-related matters. We may wish to look, I understand, I fully support the intent of this section, but we may need to address how we handle that for our elected department heads in their official capacities.
That's a great point. I see it when the clerk and treasurer are here Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, we work for the manager. In these meetings, the manager work for us. It's a dual role of the clerk and treasurer. So I would think having the clerk or treasurer go through the manager before consulting an attorney would solve that problem. It still gives the manager control over the legal budget, which can be huge.
Sure.
But it doesn't require the supervisor or the board to get involved in that decision.
That's fair. I guess
And we also do the same with FOIAs. If it involves the attorneys, we speak with the township manager about it. We think that this may be a legal item, and the township manager typically knows better than us if it's a legal matter. And so they will say, yes, it is, and we'll give it to the attorneys, or no, it's not. So we do that with FOIAs quite a bit. We work with Director Schmidt on interim township manager Schmidt on that quite a bit. It's very helpful.
Well, thank you. That's insight into the lives of the elected department heads that I didn't have. Next up is governing style, which is on the next page, item 3. This is the section that has a lot of highlight strikeout. So the board, I'm going to read what I believe to be the intended sentence. The board will enforce policymaking policy, ensure the continuance of governance using the following standards, policymaking principles, the board will. So this is, I think, where getting a clean copy will allow us to identify some issues with the language that's been left behind. I'm sure that wasn't the intent.
It's supposed to say the board will ensure the continuance of governance,
Got it. Okay.
of policymaking and governance is what it's supposed to say. So I can
We'll need to
certainly clean all that up.
zhuzh that
Clean
a
it up.
little bit. Let's see. 2 sections further, we are talking about Closed Sessions and Open Meetings Act. This is on page 7 and 8 of the document provided. Here, we basically restate a good section of the Open
Open
Meetings
Meetings
Act.
Act.
I think we probably could probably be more efficient by eliminating all of that and say the board will conduct its open and closed sessions in accordance with the Open Meetings Act.
Exactly.
And that'll eliminate a page and a half of text. Sorry to those who did a lot of work to, to put that in.
No, we agreed, but it was written in there and it was written in wrong with old, and we didn't want to take it out completely, so we just, it was easy to copy paste and replace it and let the board decide, we don't need this in here, or we want it in there.
Well, that's the
yeah.
nature of incorporating by reference, right? So
Yes.
if the state legislature ever decides to change the Open Meetings Act,
Yep.
we're in compliance.
The only thing I would add with that is for new board members, we do need to make sure they're trained to know what the Open Meetings Act as part of their orientation.
Agreed.
Right. But you don't have to state that
You don't have to
necessarily.
state it there, but it
Right.
needs to be communicated to all of our members.
Page 9, item 6, this is to promote regional cooperation. So I love the intent of this, but the idea is that we will name a liaison to school boards, bordering municipalities, county authorities, and that's 6A. I don't know that there's enough of us to effectively do that with how many bordering municipalities, school boards, county agencies, et cetera. I think we're certainly doing some of those, but it may be wise to either enumerate the ones that we very much want to do and identify those we want to meet as a board with occasionally, or find another way to address that. So that section, I think, in my opinion, would be helpful to take a peek at. Trustee Wilson?
I also noted that the opening paragraph to 6 is identical to clause B, so it's repetitious.
Oh, so it is. Yeah, so we may be able to have an economy of
Take that
words
out.
there as well.
So I'm going to condense this, reduce redundancies, and eliminate naming a liaison to each of these groups. Is that correct?
You're basically going to have that opening statement, and that's it.
Yep, thank you.
The next paragraph, Rule 3, again, we're reiterating the Open Meetings Act.
Yep.
With the public notice requirements. Rule 5 on page 10, in regard to public remarks. The agendas should include the following wording at the end: public remarks, maximum 1 hour, 3 minutes per person. That's news to me.
Yeah, that sure is.
I thought we deleted that, Deb.
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
Rule
Page
5,
10,
last
Rule 5,
sentence.
The last sentence. Public remarks, maximum, oh, right there. Public remarks, maximum 1 hour, 3 minutes per person. In practice, we definitely don't cap the total public remarks at 1 hour, and I believe that,
You can't.
the MSU Board of Trustees caught a lot of flack for trying to do so.
Yeah,
So-
my apologies. I meant to eliminate that and didn't do that. My apologies for that.
Yeah, I thought we had eliminated
Yeah.
that in our last meeting.
Yep. We did, Peter.
Next section, agenda procedures. We seem to have struck through that the agenda shall be posted in the Meridian Municipal Building and only indicated that we were posting it online. I think it's still good practice that we should post it physically. A number of our residents may not have access to the internet or may choose not to go on the internet to see our agendas. And I think it's still wise, if someone wishes to come in and see our agenda in the township hall, that they should be able to do that.
Okay, so that's agenda procedures, item
Number
number
5.
5.
You got it. And then the next section I didn't understand, and I've tried. I read it 4 times. So this implies that we have an annual agenda. This is agenda planning. the next section.
What paragraph are you on?
So this is on page 11 of the document,
Okay.
agenda planning. To accomplish board goals with a governance style consistent with board policies, the board will follow an annual agenda which completes a re-exploration of board policies and continually improves board performance. And then there's 5 bullet points that come after that.
I think what is intended there is that it will have an annual goal setting.
Yeah,
Then that's the way it should be
yeah,
stated.
we should probably say it that way
Well,
then.
that's going back to the old,
That's the ends,
yeah.
yeah.
Will follow its annual goal-setting objectives.
Yeah.
All right, so have an annual goal-setting meeting, period.
I mean, if,
No, that's a different topic. It's just saying that governance style will follow its annual goal-setting objectives that set the tone for the year based on the goals.
Okay, so instead of an annual agenda, follows an annual goal.
Will follow its annual goal-setting objectives.
Okay.
okay. Sorry, I've only got, I think, 3 more, so bear with me. Rule 6, conduct of the meetings. Township Board shall annually select a supervisor pro tem to chair board meetings in the absence of. Our attorneys have informed us that we also need to have temporary clerk in the absence of the clerk. It might be wise to do that annually as well. So we may want to add that as something to do at the beginning of the year. And then in the minutes policy, this is page 14. This is my last comment, sorry.
Before you leave page 12,
Yep.
disorderly conduct. It reads in the third sentence, disorderly conduct is defined as exceeding designated time limits. Do we reference what time limits there are for board discussions? This has not been an issue the past 4 years, but it certainly was an issue the first 4 years in the board. As Deborah remembers, Kathy remembers, we had a board member that would routinely take the floor for 30 minutes or more.
My read of this was that it was relating to exceeding public comment time limits.
Right.
Not for board members specifically.
Right.
It was relating to any person.
Okay?
I did not notice a time limit for board comments anywhere in here.
It's not a problem now, but since we're setting these rules out there, we might do a future board a big favor by setting out some time limits which would be something that the nature that a board member will not speak more than 15 minutes. That even seems long. 10 minutes on any topic and 5 minutes in a rebuttal.
I don't see how you could put a time limit on. It feels very arbitrary.
Well, again, if you sat through some of those meetings that went on for hours and hours with one board member speaking for an hour at a time, someone else responding, and then him or her going off for another 30 minutes, you think, where's the rule on this? And without a rule, you can't really challenge that. You just got to sit through it and endure it.
Well, under Robert's rules, you can make a motion to call the question.
Yes, you can.
And that ends debate if it's
Right.
approved by the board.
It can, but the problem with that is the other members who haven't had a chance to speak on it now have been excluded from speaking because the one person took up all the time. And you call the question and then the discussion's ended. It's something to think about before we make our final decisions.
Yeah. I'm not
It
sure.
has been a problem in past boards.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider. Perhaps, I think I have to go back and dust off my Robert's rules, but there may also be, you can limit discussion on a specific agenda item. I don't know. We'll take a peek and see if there's any regulatory framework that's already out there that we can look at. It's a good idea, though.
It does say, right after disorderly conduct, the decorum of the board.
Right.
And it does state, debate must be confined to the merits of the pending question. And speakers must address their remarks to the chair supervisor.
Oh, you get a person likes to go off, they'll argue that's all related to the merits of the question, so reasonableness doesn't apply in those people.
Right.
I'm not sure that the supervisor doesn't have the authority to cut off a member of the board for redundancy. You've already said it, you're wasting time going on to the next speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there may be some regulatory options available.
There may be.
So let's do some research on it, and come back to that one. I think that's a good idea, though. Then on page 14, minutes of closed session. My understanding, yes, they are to be destroyed. The way others do it that I've seen, they still approve closed session meeting minutes as we would any other meeting minute.
Which item are you on? I'm sorry.
This is in minutes policy on page 14. It's item 11.
Item 11, thank you.
So it just, I guess it's item 10 and 11. It discusses closed session minutes. And in the previous area, when we're talking about non-closed session minutes, it mentions that they are approved. We, for whatever reason, don't seem to approve closed session minutes. And I think it's still probably worthwhile for us to do so that the board recognizes and approves
All minutes.
all minutes. And so I think we probably should take a look at how we handle closed session minutes. It still
Agreed.
should be approved. They
Yes.
still should be signed by the clerk and the supervisor before they're put in a drawer for a year to hang out until they're eventually disposed of.
They're just not part of the packet.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So I happen to know in my day job, the way the county does it is at the beginning of the meeting that follows a closed session, staff will distribute a confidential packet of minutes from the closed session. The members review it. They vote on it as part of the consent agenda, and then the staff collects it all back.
Right.
That's the way we've always done it on various boards I've been on too.
So I would recommend that we look at how our procedure works for that so that we're able to actually approve those minutes.
Okay.
And that's it for me. Sorry, I probably filibustered long enough to violate the spirit of the treasurer's
Phil's
rules.
gonna time you.
So that was my thoughts.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes, thank you.
I have one more serious issue on page 3.
3?
Yes, under Board Members' Code of Conduct, item 2, members must avoid conflict of interest with respect to their fiduciary responsibility. That is not the only reason to avoid conflict of interest, and there are interests that may not involve a financial conflict. So I would like to see the end of that statement stricken so that we're very clear that any conflict of interest has to be disclosed and avoided.
That may solve the treasurer's comment from earlier also.
Yep.
Or it could say fiduciary or otherwise.
The actual legal definition, I believe, is that a conflict of interest, a conflict of interest is a situation in which a person or organization is involved in multiple interests, financial or otherwise, and serving one interest could involve working against another.
So the term itself is self-explanatory.
Yeah, I think just more of a definition there is appropriate, or just leave it at conflict of interest.
Has this been brought to our attorneys as of yet?
No, we wanted to bring it to the board first, since they're looking at the personnel policy and see what changes we should make that the board agrees with, policy procedure-wise, and then bring them a more final copy. Okay. So they're not looking at all this yellow highlight stricken stuff in there.
They get the clean copy.
And maybe they'll read it quicker and we'll have less of a charge too.
Yeah, I think that's wise, just so we make sure that, number one, we haven't added anything that's going to find us running afoul of
Yes.
state statute, but also maybe they'll find items that were left out that are required of us by state statute, so it might be helpful. Other board members? Trustee Sunland.
I did notice, and I can't point exactly where it was because I was just taking notes, but that the board members need to notify the clerk of absence, and I've been notifying the supervisor all along. So maybe we should notify both of you.
I don't mind getting email. Feel free to keep including me.
Yes.
That'll at least keep me aware of whether we have a quorum.
And I apologize, Deb, in advance that I haven't been notifying you of my absence. But I
No
just.
one does.
I
It's
noticed,
okay.
I noticed that right there and I went, oh, I've been doing it all wrong.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none, I think we've given you some thoughts and consideration here.
Thank you. We appreciate the feedback, and we will bring you a clean copy at the next meeting.
Thank you.
And again, I want to, if you don't mind, I want to thank Trustee Trezise and HR Director T. Hawk. This a tremendous amount of work went into this, and I can't thank them enough for being on this team and working on this together with them. It's been a pleasure being in this work group.
Very good. Next up is agenda item 13B for discussion, Police Department contract with Michigan State University. Mr. Schmidt.
My apologies, my window just closed.
And a door opened.
So this, thank you.
That's fine.
So this is actually a new one. So as everyone's aware, we provide services to Michigan State University for large events, most notably football games. Last year, there was a large delay, for whatever reason, for us to get reimbursed from Michigan State for us providing them with police services during the football games. Through nobody's fault on our part, it happened. And so Michigan State wanted to go to a more formal process this year, and that's hence the contract. They sent us a draft in July. We've sent it over to our attorneys. This is our attorneys' strike up. We were hoping to have Michigan State sign off tonight. Their attorneys are reviewing. There's one thing specifically that we kind of figured they wouldn't. Two governmental agencies trying to work out indemnifications amongst each other.
That's fine.
Is functionally where we're at. And so we wanted to at least get this in front of the board, make sure there are no major concerns with this. And then assuming we will have Michigan State's final blessing or final comments before the next meeting, we'll bring it back for final adoption. Obviously, we're going to continue to work with them as we've done for years and years in the past. What this does is it gives us both a sense of a peace of mind that we're all working together here and no one's hanging each other out to dry from a liability perspective. It is also giving us a known deadline for when we'll get paid. And we are providing them with a flat rate, actually. Previously, we would calculate it based on which officers actually signed up for the event, which was causing us more effort on the administrative side than it was worth. And so this is a reasonable flat rate that is a reasonable average of our officers' salaries. Something we'll probably revisit on an annual basis with them to make sure that we're still in the right parameters. But this just is going to make it easier for us on a go-forward basis. Again, we commit to providing 6. We'll provide up to 10 if there is a need and our officers are available. This is not something where we'll pull 4 more away. If people sign up, great. If they don't, you got 6. That's what we can commit to. And so just would welcome any feedback from the board at this time. Chief Gurlow is here. He is in the lobby listening to an issue. And so if I need him, I can grab him, but I should be able to answer most of the questions about this.
Board members, any questions or discussion? Trustee Trezise.
Is this reimbursing the township for their services, or does this go as extra pay for the officer?
It's reimbursement to the township. And so
this is their regular shift or possibly an overtime? We wouldn't do it in overtime.
we, in theory, could. That gets into some of the complications as to the exact rates, and that's why we just went with an average of $75.
Okay.
But this is, and you'll probably see a policy from us in early November, if I'm guessing, on this and fire both have these cost recovery funds. There's really no good, we don't have a policy, and so we'll be bringing a policy forward of how that money comes back to us and then gets spent going forward.
Yes, if you're anticipating revisiting the hourly rate on an annual basis, it should be built into the contract itself, because it's a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
So to allow that flexibility, whether you change it or not, at least it's understood that it can be revisited.
Clerk, Trustee Wilson.
Are I noticed this is under review by the attorneys. Are the changes that they're recommending that have gone to Michigan State substantial that we should know about them?
Yes. Well, this is their version. This is, our attorneys have reviewed this. This is the version with their changes. So that's the version we're presenting you. If Michigan State comes back with substantial changes, that's what's going to slow us down a little bit.
Okay.
We're just, candidly, we tried to have this in place before the football season, and a lot of things conspired against us. So we're just trying to move it along a little bit, see if there's any concern from the board before we get Michigan State's feedback.
And do you feel that $75 an hour is sufficient to cover the expenditures?
That is the number the chief provided, and he is comfortable with it at this time.
Thank you.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. I'm having a hard time understanding the flat rate of $75 an hour for 6 officers. So is it 75 per officer or 75 for 6 officers?
It's 75 per officer per hour.
Okay, the way I read it is a flat rate of $75 an hour for 6 to 10 officers. That's how I'm reading the memo. So when I calculated it was $12.50 an hour per officer. That's how I was reading the memo, and I was becoming extremely alarmed. So if it's a flat rate of $75 an hour per officer, that makes complete sense to me, and I would rather have it read that way than how it reads, because it reads as if it's $75 an hour for 6 to 10 officers.
No, apologies if the memo is unclear. Schedule A on page 198 of your packet specifically outlines that the hourly rate for law enforcement services is X dollars per hour.
Thank you. I'm going to that page. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other board members? Treasurer DeShane.
I have a question. I see the chief is here. Maybe he could answer this. Is this considered a perk of the officers? Do they enjoy doing this work?
That is a question I would have to defer to the chief.
Yes, sir. There are quite a few officers that enjoy the overtime and sign up very frequently for these games.
So, and is it usually paid from overtime, particularly with your staffing shortages you've had recently? Are all these hours essentially overtime hours?
Yeah, we have a budget line item specifically for, we call it school security. So that pays for Okemos High School football games, has the basketball games and the MSU football games, those types of things.
Okay. What is, and the $75 includes the overtime and the benefit cost for each of these officers by your estimation?
Yes, sir.
Good. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members? Well, I will just comment to say how unusual it is that someone would come to us to demand a contract so that they can pay us faster. I appreciate that from our partners at Michigan State. I didn't have any issues with the content of it. I hope that we'll hear back from them in short order.
Yeah, we did talk to them today, and they were like, yeah, our legal is still going through functionally one paragraph. I mean, I'm sure they're looking at the other changes, but it's functionally one paragraph.
Yeah. Okay, so then we will await the response from their attorneys and our attorney's response and their attorney's response, and then eventually see it in basketball season.
At some point, I will just sit down with the president, the new president, and we'll just hash it out.
There you go. All right. Seeing no other discussion, move on to agenda item 13C, the Transportation Commission. Mr. Schmidt.
This is, the timing seemed right to have this conversation, because the CATA millage is the last time we'll be collecting that is in this tax season. And so the Transportation Commission was formed originally as a response to the bus rapid transit proposal. The bus rapid transit proposal is functionally dead, if not fully dead. And so it sort of then evolved into other issues related to CATA and non-motorized transportation, things of that nature. They assisted with the CATA red red millage. They assisted with the non-motorized master plan update when I first got here in 2021. But largely, there's not a great hue and cry from the public to serve on this commission. There's not a lot of issues that we've taken to this commission, and they haven't met for almost a year at this point. And so staff believes that this is a commission that's run its course, and hence the discussion in front of you this evening. Deputy Major Opsmer is here as well to answer any other related transportation questions, but I think that certainly anything that the Transportation Commission would need to take up could be ably handled by the Planning Commission or any other number of boards we have.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. And just to point out, we do have on a body of, I think, 7 intended, we have 2 members. And Trustee Sumlin is our liaison.
Yes,
So they do not even have a quorum if they needed to meet on something.
Right.
correct.
Treasurer DeShane.
I was honored to be appointed the first member of the Transportation Commission. Before that, it was actually called the Ready Ride Committee that was formed as a direct outgrowth of the BRT. And its objective was to improve relations with CATA. Well, CATA has a new director now and a whole new approach towards us in Meridian Township. I think all the goals of the Transportation Commission have been met. Our relationship with CATA is excellent and continues to improve all the time. But they did their work, and it's done now. I think we can disband it, and especially with so few members, we have no choice about it. Either recruit heavily for it or disband it. But as there is no real business before it currently, I fully support staff's recommendation to disband it.
Other members? Trustee McCurtis.
Excuse me. I was on the Transportation Commission while I was on the Planning Commission. And I really enjoyed it because we were able to talk about the, like the safety of pedestrians and that sort of thing when it comes to the lighting and all that. And also the bike paths and CATA as well. I hate to see it go, but I understand why. I just wanted to make that comment. I hate to see it go because it allowed people, even community members came and spoke with us about some of the concerns they had about, right between Meyer and McDonald's, the crossing the street there and the island in the middle of Grand River. It was just good. And also we all know about the school over near Kennewaw. It was good to have that commission there to sort of act as a, I don't know what I'm trying to say, as a authoritative figure to make sure these things were be taken care of. I hate to see it go, but as long as we can still ensure the safety of our residents and the wishes of our residents and not having it, and of course I'm all for it. Just hate to see it go.
Other board members? I'll agree with Trustee McCurtis. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves here, but I think, we have a number of boards and commissions that could distribute the workload that, any remaining workload that the Transportation Commission would have in front of it. Obviously, this board cares very deeply about, making sure that we have adequate pathways, making sure that we address public transit and our road infrastructure. And the Planning Commission works on that as well. So I do think, their last meeting, according to what we have on our agendas here, is September 21st of last year. And so we are essentially one full year since their last meeting. And I agree that I think that at this point, the commission has run its course. If at any point down the road, there are new and more complex challenges or public interest in applying for this or recreating this in some way, we could certainly always look back and look at the possibility of doing that. But for now, a year out with no meetings and no members really, I think it's time to call it a day. Clerk Guthrie.
Supervisor, thank you for those comments. I concur with trustee McCurtis and your comments as well. And it would be maybe good of the board to review other boards and commissions as well. And if there is a need for all of the boards and commissions that we have, I know there have been struggles on some of the other boards and commissions. And maybe that is part of the annual board retreat and goal planning session. I just wanted to put that thought out there in the rest of the board members' minds that there are other boards and commissions out there that probably have run their course as well.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I know that a number of them are statutorily required. You know, we have
Yep.
to have a CIA
Right.
if we're going to have a corridor improvement authority. We have to have a DDA if we're going to have.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think it's wise to, dust everything off every now and then and make sure that we're doing what we need to do and we're not doing things that are inefficient and not meeting. So, thank you. Any further comment? Seeing none, we'll see you next time.
We'll have it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is agenda item 13D, the community survey initial data discussion. And for this, we have Director Clark.
I'm going to kick it off. She's available as well for discussion. I just, because we're doing this a little different this year, because we're giving you the raw data ahead of sort of the presentation from Cobalt. This is the unfiltered data that has been provided to us. 392 people took the survey. We are, pretty pleased with that. That's a good response in our eyes. Again, I think that this is, there's a lot of information in here, and we are going to largely defer to our presentation from Cobalt in 2 weeks. But if there are any sort of initial questions that the board has that we can relay back, excellent time to bring them up.
Okay. Board members? I know this was a fun chart to read.
This
Any
is something
comments
else.
or questions? Clerk Guthrie.
Will this come back to the board as a discussion item once we have the summary?
So typically how we've done it in the past is there's a presentation from Cobalt and there's a
Yes.
discussion associated with that.
Good.
And so that's our
So the
expectation.
intent is to do that.
That is our expectation for the next meeting.
Thank you. That is what I wanted to see and was hoping that the board would see.
Well, first of all, I appreciate us, deviating slightly from our standard procedure. As a data nerd, I love this. One of the things that I noticed that was really remarkable is that, there's a whole section of ratings questions. This is sort of rate your happiness with our departments and services. And in almost every category, there was an increase in rating from 3 years ago. And I think that, certainly, I think every category that our employees, have direct impact in. And so I wanted to simply say kudos to our staff for being excellent and for continually improving and providing better services to our residents. I think the results of this survey indicate that our residents continue to be more and more happy with what it is that the township provides. And specifically relating to what our township employees who are frontline and, the impact that they have on our residents. Yeah, lots of good data here. I'm looking at the old packet again. Drat. Okay, I'll defer for a moment to anyone else who has comments while I pull up the other packet and make sure I am looking at the newest one. Any other board members with comments? Trustee Wilson.
It would be really helpful, and I assume Cobalt will do this, rather than having comments that begin with the first word the individual used to comment, like "we," for instance, to have those grouped. Because and given some kind of number, for instance, I noted that safety, that people feel safe here and crave safety is probably number one, based on so many comments, but they were distributed so deep in the data, it was really hard to figure out how many people were saying that in the comments. So I'd like to see more. I assume Cobalt can do that for us?
We will follow up with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Trustee McCurtis.
I found it, even though I was able to get through it and read it, I found it hard to read. I don't know if there's a way they can make it more user or reader friendly, even if they were to use graphs or bar graphs or something, just to, so that we can have an immediate, oh, okay, we went up here, we went up there, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It was a lot to get through to understand what our residents were saying.
Yeah, and we will, the summary presentation is typically a lot more of that as opposed to the hard data.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll come, what, next meeting?
That is our hope, yes.
Okay. Treasurer Shane.
I would hope that after we get the presentation from Cobalt, we would take the document further and maybe use it as part of our annual board retreat to make sure that our work and our goals are in alignment with those of our residents. I think it's good, it's great information. We paid a lot for this survey, and we should make sure that we're listening to what our residents are saying, and we're moving in the same direction that they are in terms of their goals for where the township is headed.
I agree. So of interest, the reason why it was not in the old packet, it's in the new packet. To that very end, the board, as we know, added a number of questions to the survey relating to our next agenda item, which is the Community and Senior Center Task Force. Do you believe the township would benefit from a community and senior center? 71% yes, 25% no. Would you use a community and senior center? 70% yes, 26% no. And then the top 5 items that were listed in the features you would like to see: low impact workout area, recreational facilities, including volleyball, pickleball, basketball, dedicated senior center area, large auditorium, and multi-purpose space. So really interesting feedback from them there. Was really pleased that we were able to hear from our residents directly on this issue, and I look forward to continuing that work over the next few months here. Any other comments or discussion on the data? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is the agenda item 13E. Bear with me as I scroll. This is the Senior and Community Center Task Force. So this is an issue that we've obviously talked about a fair amount over the last year and a half. Trustee Wilson capably managed the first iteration of our Senior and Community Center Task Force and got us through a lot of the initial hurdles to do that, to get that process going and off the ground, and we thank her for that. The board, as we all recall, at our August 8th meeting, chose not to move forward with ballot language for the November ballot. And if you can bear with me to summarize the comments, it was mostly related to the cost of operating such a center and the total overall cost of such a project, and opting not yet to put it in front of our residents. However, I think the survey results that we see here and the fact that the senior center is due to go away at the end of the 2028 school year indicates to us that we have to do something. And so I propose to reconstitute the Senior and Community Center Task Force in a slightly more formalized way. The intent here is to have it available, have it meet on a monthly basis. We'll decide the full schedule once the body meets to discuss that. And to do so at, after hours, to take minutes, to have a more formalized discussion, and to have a formal roster of folks who are attending and taking part. In the memo this evening, you'll see the proposed members of the task force. We have reached out to each of these folks, and I believe all of them have agreed to be a part of this. Myself, as Township Supervisor, one of our Parks Commissioners, Amanda Lick, a member of the Senior Center Advisory Commission, Barbara O'Kelly, the superintendents of both Hazlet and Okemos Public School Districts. We reached out to Sachir Nagasetti, who you'll remember was here about the Youth Commission. He agreed that this, while the Youth Commission may take some time to establish, that this would be an excellent way for him to contribute as well to his community. Luann Maisner, who's of course our former Parks and Recreation Director, who's been through a number of capital projects and is an excellent visionary for this type of thing. And then Josh Robertson, who is a member of one of our boards and commissions. And
Michelle.
What's that?
Michelle Steed.
Yes, I'm sorry, Michelle. Steed. And Michelle is a member of our senior community. And she was selected at Director Wazinski's recommendation. There are a number of folks who take advantage of the Parks and Recs Department's senior offerings who are not actively members of the current senior center. And the rationale for including Ms. Steed in the task force is that she may be able to offer some unique and new offerings that the senior center could have that it doesn't have already, which may bring folks in who are of an age where they could use the senior center but currently don't. We have a vibrant senior community who is in the township but doesn't yet use the center, and her involvement may help us to identify things that seniors may wish to have. And so those are the 9 folks that are being proposed to be included in this. The mission of the group will be twofold. One, to present a proposal for a joint community and senior center, and the second, to offer a proposal for a standalone senior center, as we recognize that the board and the residents may have differing opinions on which of those is the preferred way forward. And of course, to offer costs to operate both of those facilities, basically to put forward 2 proposals. One where we have the opportunity to move forward as a standalone, one where we have the opportunity to move forward as a joint venture. And so the task force will hold its first meeting on September 24th at 6 p.m. in this room. We will ask that agendas be presented ahead of time, that packets will be presented ahead of time, and that minutes will be taken and approved as with any other board or commission that we have in the township. We are going to, I think we've opted not to televise at this moment, pending a conversation with the Communications Commission and identifying from staff if we have the resources available to do so. So we'll try to figure that out in the near future here. Only some of our boards and commissions are televised for that very reason. With that said, that was my, my introduction to this. Oh, sorry. The timeline of the task force would be to present these prior to the ballot proposal deadline for the August ballot of 2025. And I say prior to, with enough time that we have the opportunity to have our standard two-meeting discussion and action on that. And so ideally, we would be done at the end of March so that we have our 2 meetings in April to discuss that as a township board with the recommendations of the task force. So that is my introduction on this topic. Any discussion? Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. I appreciate the effort to put this back together. I too was on the initial task force with Chairperson Trustee Wilson. A lot of work went into it, but we did find that the end product that came from that wasn't acceptable to the seniors, and it wasn't acceptable to the board. So I think we got to do it again and do it differently this time to get it right. I like your idea of 2 recommendations, a senior center and a senior center community center. But I think within that, we need to break that out further, because I would like to see a proposal that involved no new tax increase. We all heard at least I heard a lot of people at the doors this summer saying we are at our max for taxes. So it's probably not possible for a community center, senior center, but it might be possible for a senior center to take the $5 million we've got, maybe $1 million from Slotkin, and a reasonable amount from the township's general fund reserve and capital improvements fund, maybe $3 million, and maybe another $1 million for privately raised. That would give them a budget of maybe $10 million to have a no tax increase senior center. And then a second proposal for each that maybe had a moderate tax increase, 0.4 mils, which is the same number of mills that are going to fall off the tax bill next year. So it would be no net increase for those 2 that fall away. And then maybe even a third proposal, maybe a little bit higher, 0.6 mil. I don't think this board showed a strong aversion to a 1.1 mil tax increase for this. So let's keep it well within that. And that's my recommendation. Secondly, I would like to see these televised if possible. And there's a lot of interest in it. If you have to pay intern overtime, it's worth it. Let's have these on TV. There's lots of concerns over the last process that wasn't public. Let's put it on TV. We got the resources. Let's bring in the staff if we have to. Third idea, I think it would maybe to have some updates from the task force. Maybe 6 weeks in, 12 weeks in, where they're at. They might have some questions about locations, about other things. And so let's have them come to the board and get some further direction from the board rather than coming back in 6 months with a proposal that's up or down. I think the board should have some input in that direction as they go. I think the board really needs to be hands-off at this time, and no board members should be involved. And Supervisor Hendrickson, you and I have talked about this ahead of time. You are a very able supervisor, but I think in this case, we don't want a board member on this task force. I think it better to be led by staff. Someone, I'm thinking in particular of Deputy Manager Opsimer, who has been on this board and understands the board's perspective and on staff. I think a lot of the work to be done here to bring forward proposals will be required by staff, working with engineers, working with architects, property owners to see what's available, what our options are, what the cost might be. I think that's staff level work. And by removing the board from it, we avoid the criticism that we've got it in for seniors, the board's got it in for seniors. Let the staff come up with a recommendation, and then the board does its job to adjudicate it. It really fits our role. We're a corporate governance board. We're not a board that comes in and helps the manager with employee evaluations. We're not a board that is hands-on work. We are a board that sets goals and then rates the work that's been done by the manager, as well as set policy and ordinances, of course. But in terms of the daily operations of the township, we are hands-off. We evaluate the manager. I think we should evaluate the work of the task force, and none of us should be part of the work of the task force. And we would then avoid any claims of prejudice that we're trying to bring back the old proposal with a different wrapping on it. Let's avoid that completely. Let's have the task force come up with its own recommendations that brings back for the whole board to review. The board will give it feedback if they come to us for more input, but we haven't created this plan. They have, and we would be the ones to say, yes, this is acceptable, or of the options available, this is the one that we think should go on the ballot. So again, with no disrespect to you, you're a very able supervisor. I don't think you're the best person to chair this committee with, in part, this task force in part because of the history of the work that was done and the vote was taken. We all showed a bias, if you will, on August 8th when we voted up or down on that. And so none of us can claim to be objective as we need to have an objective chair for this task force. So those are my thoughts. It's more than 2 proposals based on cost, televised the meetings, and a different chairperson. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other board members? Clerk Guthrie.
Okay, if there's no other board members, I have a few questions. So, thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. Can you explain further why these particular task force members were selected to be on the task force? And can you also, I can't tell from this if there's an even representation of community members across Hazlet and Okemos and where these community members are. And I'd like to be able to know that there's Hazlet representation, Okemos representation, and that the different community makeups of the township are being represented on the task force. So can you speak to that?
Sure. So the composition of the board, the task force rather, would include a member of the board, a member of the Parks Commission, since they deal with a lot of the issues that, that would come up in those two things, a member of the Senior Center Advisory Commission, the superintendent of Hazlet Schools, the superintendent of Okemos Schools. This is because of our longstanding partnerships with Okemos School District with the current senior center, but also there may be a future partnership with the Hazlet schools as well in this area. A member, Suchir was selected as a member representing youth. If the community center is something that we choose to go forward with, having a perspective of younger folks would be, I think, a good thing. Michelle Steele, as I mentioned, is a senior resident who is not currently involved in the senior center, but may wish to become. Director Maisner, for her experience and leadership in some of these projects similar to this. And then Josh Robertson, who represents sort of that middle-aged, got a young family, working, so that, we have all the different age groups represented. Not all, but as many as we can feasibly have on a 9-person task force.
But from this, is this a even representation of, I get that perspective of these different groups are being represented, but I'd also like to assure that we have representation from Hazlet and Okemos. I don't want to get started in this and Hazlet residents saying, oh, you had 10 more people from Okemos on this task force than Hazlet, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You had 10 people from Hazlet on here, but no one from Okemos. And you know how that goes with our community members. And I want to make sure that we avoid that and make sure that this task force has an even representation, or as much even as possible, from Okemos and Hazlet sitting on this task force. And that's my biggest concern, is that I can't tell that the two largest sections of our community are being represented evenly from these names that are given.
Sure. Well, I'll admit that I didn't do an address search on every single one of these folks. What I can tell you is that they are all Meridian residents. So, to me, we are one community. I understand that there is a very strong affinity, when you're from Hazlet, when you're from Okemos, to those areas. But in this, we are creating a Meridian Township. What we are proposing to create perhaps a senior center or a senior community center for Meridian Township, for all of us. And so that was my perspective coming in at it.
Okay. And I get that, I understand that. But we also do know that people do have issue with lack of representation or being included, and that there are fingers that are pointed. And so I would like that looked at to assure that we do have that all of the youth representative and the resident and Luann and all of these other people aren't just all from Okemos, and the only Hazlet person is Patrick Maley, the superintendent of Hazlet. I would like that to be looked at and considered, that there is an even representation, especially given the fact that the senior center has been in an Okemos school for since its inception. And I do agree that we need to move it to the center of the township, but we do need to be inclusive of all residents. And so I do want to make sure that we are inclusive of those two largest segments of our population in this representation here.
I see Deputy Manager Opsimer, who may have been looking people up while we've been talking.
I wasn't looking anybody up, but I can give you the reassurance that you have 2 persons on that body that live in the Hazlet zip code.
There you go. Thank you.
At least. One of them is John Hood.
No. There you go.
No, it doesn't even live in the
And
township.
Josh Robertson.
Robertson lives up there too? So I think it's 4 and 5 then,
He's in
based on my
Brooklyn.
quick research.
Okay. That makes me feel more comfortable, is that there's an even representation, and I hope the board doesn't have issue with me saying that. I do also agree with having more of an outside perspective with the leadership of the task force, and I love our township supervisor. I think you are fantastic, and I love working with you, and you do a phenomenal job. And I think Trustee Wilson has been doing a phenomenal job as well, leading the senior task force. And I love working with both. You're both fantastic. So there's no negative about either of you and your leadership capabilities. I think you're great leaders. But I do agree with Treasurer DeShane in regards to having a outside person be the chair and to bring this group together, especially given a lot of the tumultuous comments from many of our members from past meetings. So I would like the board to consider, I don't know if a staff member would be the most appropriate, or a third person from someone from the community. And in regards to televising, my opinion is the more we televise stuff, the better. So I'm always for televising meetings. Obviously, given my background, I'm all for it. So I fully support televising senior task force and as many meetings as this township can televise, given staff efficiency and the capability of our staff to be able to do it without running them into the ground, tiring them out. So I'm all for televising as many meetings as possible, not just this one.
All right.
Thank you.
So I do want to address the question of board involvement in the task force. First and foremost, it's really serendipitous that our board rules were included in tonight's packet, because both our adopted board rules and our proposed board rules state the following. Task forces may be created by the supervisor. They shall have a mission and duration, have at least one board member, and serve at the pleasure of the supervisor. So by my read, we are required to have someone on there, and they serve at the pleasure of the supervisor. And in this case, I believe that I would like to appoint myself to be included in this. Treasurer DeShane had suggested to me in private previously that, because I originally thought perhaps 2 or 3, that he thought that 1 was sufficient, which is why I have pared it back to 1. But I do believe that, as I do at each of these meetings, of course, I have thoughts on all of the agenda items that come up before us. That doesn't preclude me from being able to capably and dispassionately moderate the meeting, which is what I intend to do on this task force. I recognize, that the history of this topic is certainly, it's public information, right? We voted on it. Everyone on this board had an opinion on it. But I hear the voices of my colleagues, and it would be foolish of me to come forward and push an agenda that I don't believe would have any hope of succeeding, which would be to do basically what we did, previously. The board spoke on that. However, I do believe that the residents deserve a solution to the fact that our senior center is going away. I would like us to consider all of our options. And I believe that I will be able to capably and dispassionately moderate the discussion of the task force, of which I will be just one voting member out of 9. And so I appreciate the concerns. I've heard the concerns of the folks who have written in about it, and also my fellow board members. This is one that we are required by our board rules, and also I believe is a good idea for me to continue to be involved. Clerk Guthrie.
My apologies if I misspoke, and I know that the task force requirement does have a requirement that there's a board member. What I was intending to say, and maybe I misspoke, and so my apologies, was that I thought it should be chaired by someone other than the supervisor, not that you should be completely disbanded and off the task force.
I
So
see.
my apologies if I misspoke. That was not what I intended to say. I just felt like there should be, I think that's why I went into the whole leadership thing. I think that there should be like a different chair coordinating it.
Got
That's
it.
what I meant to say.
Okay.
For the record.
Thank you. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. If we need to have a board member, I agree with Deborah, which is that person should not be the chair of it. And why not another board member who maybe has some experience with Oklahoma schools, which would be Trustee Trezise. He also was part of the larger vote that night and would represent where the board was then. So how about Trustee Trezise as an alternative to you serving in the task force?
Well, I certainly didn't, what's that?
Go ahead.
I certainly didn't intend to, put anyone on the spot. I believe this is something that, this is a task force I would like to be involved in. Plain and simple. I mean, this is something that I feel passionately about. This is something that I brought to the board as a part of my very first goal-setting discussion with the board back in December of 2022. And I know that we have to do something. And while I certainly appreciate that Trustee Trezise has experience with the school district, this is beyond a school issue, right? This is something that will benefit all of us. It'll benefit all of our residents. And this is a task force that I intend to be on. Treasurer DeShane.
I understand your passion for it, and I think that's great. We're going to do something. We want to do something right. I would argue that you and Trustee Wilson worked very closely with staff. The task force stopped meeting in about May, and it became 2 board members meeting with staff to bring forward to the board in August that proposal. I think you've had a chance to propose something, and you have. I think it's time to step aside and let others take the lead on this alternative proposal. It will build a lot of goodwill with our senior community, and we do not want to come up with a proposal, community center or community senior center, that has our senior residents right out the gate feeling the whole process was suspect because it had essentially the same leadership of the first proposal. I know you will do your very best to be objective about it. But optics are really important in this situation. And I think the optics of you chairing or even being on the task force will not be good with a community group that is very important in this process, the current members of the Meridian Senior Center.
Clerk Guthrie.
Just a point of clarification, I'm confused. I thought that the board members who were on the former task force, I thought were Trustee Wilson and Treasurer DeShane.
Correct.
I did not think that Supervisor Hendrickson was on the former task force.
I was not, that's true.
Okay.
What I was pointing out was the task force stopped meeting last year, and at a certain level, it became two board members meeting with staff to put the proposal before. What the board voted on August 8th did not come from the task force. The task force never saw that proposal. That came from talks that two board members had with staff that brought that proposal together. So that's my point, is
Yeah. It's simply not true.
That's not true.
That is not what happened. I had exactly one meeting with staff, and it came approximately 6 days before the August meeting that we had all together. And immediately following that, as I understand it, staff had the same conversation with each board member. I did not meet with staff multiple times as you're alleging. I was involved in the public process I came to the open houses that we had. I had exactly one meeting, and then you all had the exact same meeting that I had, which was staff presenting the operating costs prior to it appearing on our agenda.
When was staff instructed to do a political survey on the likelihood of a millage being passed? And who gave staff direction to do that? Did that come from staff or did it come from board members?
I don't recall who made.
We were not provided direction. That was something that staff decided to do on our own, given the situation and the timing.
Okay.
We had budget available for it, and we made it happen.
The point is that whole process, and it came together, it was not part of the task force. And as a task force member, I felt like, what's the point of being on this task force when it was never, a recommendation was never made to the board, yet the board had a vote that apparently staff had come up with on their own. Again, the process was out of, the task force no longer was in charge of that process. And being a member of that task force, it left me with a bad feeling that having put a year under that task force and then suddenly a different proposal or a new proposal is sent to the board. I apologize if I implied that you did something you didn't. That was my assumption because of the fact that the task force wasn't consulted. And the next thing I heard of it was what came before the board on August 8th.
Sure. And I believe that you and I had a conversation where I told you that that wasn't true. And yet here you are in a public meeting trying to defame me by alleging things that I already told you did not happen. Now, you've heard from staff that that was not the case, and I'm telling you again that that is not the case. So, I bring this matter before us as a courtesy. These task forces serve at the pleasure of the supervisor, and this is the roster that I have put together to sit on the task force. I was not involved in the previous task force, despite what you may think. I was not involved in that process outside of the same involvement that everyone else around this table was. So, with that said, I'm happy to consider further discussion on this matter. This is what I intend to put forward. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. With that, and given the discussion, and given that we do have to have a township board member on the task force, and you were not on the previous task force, and your high desire to be on this task force, I do agree that you should chair the task force. I do share, and I do appreciate staff clarifying that we have an even number of Hazlet and Okemos, roughly, pretty much an even number, serving on the task force. I have not had any issue with Supervisor Hendrickson in any manner, leading any effort that this board has led or serving on any subcommittees or committees. And so I have zero concern about his capability of being transparent with this task force and doing everything on the up and up. So I do not have a problem with that, and I just want to reiterate that I do think that we should have this televised, and I would like to have it televised if at all possible, and that we let the public know well in advance of when meetings are, and that the task force meetings are on the township website as soon as the board approves them, and that is better known through our communications department, through the networks that they have to communicate that, maybe even putting together a press release and letting media know that we have a senior center task force, and maybe we can include some of the numbers from the community survey in there as well, that supports the need for the senior/community center task force.
I think, Mr. Schmidt, can you work on the behind-the-scenes requirements for televising this? It sounds like the board is interested in pursuing that.
We will. I can tell you right now, we can't make the first one because technically under the rules, the policies of the Department and Communications Commission has to sign off on televising of meetings. So we can have that discussion on their next agenda.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Trezise.
I also am in favor of this task force going forward. Just a question, do you anticipate public comment at these meetings?
I would expect so.
Okay, yeah, so that the public, once they're aware of the meetings, they can come and express their opinions. Okay.
Other board members, Trustee McCurtis.
I was going to say that for interim township manager Schmidt spoke that we should have these televised because we want as much input from the from residents, given the high interest that it has.
Other members? All right. Seeing no further discussion, we move on. Agenda item 13F. Meridian Township Building Services. Mr. Schmidt, what have you here?
Briefly, Allen Township's building inspector is retiring, and they know that we serve Mason and drive through them to get to Mason. So they reached out to see if there was a possibility for us to take them over. And we had an initial conversation with them. So after that initial conversation, the discussion was, well, I'll take it to my board, see if everyone's kosher with us proceeding, and then I'll provide them with some cost estimates, and they'll take it to their board, and we'll decide if we're gonna do it. This is not an extraordinarily large number of permits. As building official Heckman pointed out, that is roughly 3 weeks. Their annual permits, roughly 3 weeks for us. So we should easily be able to absorb this, and we will provide them with with a financial plan essentially equal to roughly what we started with Mason is my guess. Just the volume is not there. The big change from their perspective, and we sort of told them this to start with, is the commercial plan review, which happens once every 2 or 3 months. We can't just do that on a flat rate like the previous guy was doing. We're gonna have to charge by the hour on that, but we'll be pretty fair with them on everything else. So I just want to bring this to the board because this will turn into a contract eventually. If there's any concerns, now is a great time to raise them, or if you believe we should not proceed with this, but otherwise we will work with Alden to get something on paper and bring it back for final adoption.
Trustee Trezise.
I'm always in favor of collaborating with our neighbors, and if we can do this and provide them with a service that saves them some money and covers some of our costs and expenses, I think it's the way to go. So my read would keep exploring.
Okay. Other board members? More or less, Trustee Wilson.
I concur with Trustee Trezise's comments.
I will only point out this probably will move relatively quickly because he retires as of today.
Okay.
They have an interim plan in place, and we offered, much as we do with Williamstown Township when their guys on vacation, happy to cover a couple of inspections for you and just charge it directly to the permit holder. So we will, unless there's another concern, we will proceed with them and bring something back more formally in the very near future.
They have less than 1 week.
Yeah. Williamstown is like, it's once every couple of years.
Okay. All right.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 14, comments from the public. Peggy Frisch, we have a green card from.
Hi, I'm not in a hole, I was just short. My name is Peggy Frisch. I'm president of the Senior Center Advisory Board, and I've actually worked for Home TV. Well, I volunteered. My husband and I were co-hosts of Senior Living until COVID sort of wiped that out. But anyway, the seniors look forward to working with the board or whatever to come up with a new senior center, but this community/senior center, drop the community center. It's a dead horse. Why are we still kicking it? And when you ask a question like, do you agree with the community/senior center? Well, what if I just agree with one? I don't have a way to say that on that question. Your questionnaire, I hope you didn't pay big money for that. There were under 400 people represented in a township of what? 40, 50,000? It's ridiculous. Anyway, I can sense from your discussion that you think you might have a problem with your credibility with the seniors. And you do. You do. And that's why at one point we were talking about a facilitator. And that way it would be much easier for sides to come up with a communication that works for both of us. In terms of where to put this, drive down Okemos Road and look at how many empty buildings there are. And for the money that you have, I'm understanding that the lease by Ide, they're loving to sell those buildings. They're going to put them up for auction. So maybe that's a better solution. It can buy a building that can be redone, take down walls, whatever you have to do, but it could be done for a reasonable amount of money. And in this economic times, I don't think asking people for more money is a real good idea. I heard the comment that people in this township will pass any millage. Well, guess what? I don't believe that. They may pass any school millage, but I don't think the rest of them are necessarily. A lot of the people who live in this township, this is not their forever home. You know why they're in this township? Because of the school system. I mean, they're only working here from India or Asia, wherever they're from. They're only working here on a short time. And when they're gone, I don't know. It's going to be a problem for everybody. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak this evening? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 8:56.
Could I just say?
Please come to the podium if you would, and then give us your name and address.
I am Ellen Portnoy still. My address is 3603 Breezy Point Drive, and I live in Okemos. But what my request is, the senior center oftentimes on the agenda is the last item to be discussed. This happened before, and obviously tonight. Can we please at least do some variation, so at some points we would have more people here if we weren't at the very end, the tail end of the meeting, if you would please, and that's it. And everybody go home.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 8:57. Stephen, we already actually have one. Yeah, we do, yep. Other members and board member, other matters and board member comments, agenda item 15. Trustee McCurtis.
Yes, I know that we've received several emails about the new marijuana dispensary on Okemos Road in Jolly. and the sign that is there. And when I drive by and I still see the sign up, is that jars, I think it is. Is that supposed to be taken down? If so, when? What is the issue with that?
So the sign on the building was the major concern that we had originally, and that was removed. The sign that is in the, I'm blanking on the word.
The one that's by the curb.
The monument sign, yeah, that is a permitted sign.
Oh, it is, okay.
We can't, this goes to, the sign is existing, and we cannot regulate what is on that face. Now, obviously, the word cannabis aside, marijuana aside, which we discussed, that, having that logo there is perfectly legal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely.
That's all I have.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you Supervisor Hendrickson. According to the home TV operating policies, the communications manager is responsible for generating program ideas and for implementing and overseeing their production. All programming decisions are to be made by the communications manager according to these home TV operating policies and procedures. It further goes on to say that special production requests must be submitted to the communications manager at least 1 week prior to the requested taping date. In section 2, it talks about township meeting coverage, and it further says, the communications department staff and home TV interns are responsible for live coverage of the meetings. Live coverage of regularly scheduled township meetings shall be the #1 programming priority. Schedule adjustments must be made in order to accommodate, and then it further says, to schedule special meeting coverage, the staff liaison to the board or commission in question must present, in this case, the township manager to the township board. Staff liaison to the board or commission in question must present the television coverage request to the communications manager in writing at least 2 weeks in advance of the meeting. Special efforts will be made to provide skeleton crew coverage of township board or commission meetings which are scheduled with less than 2 weeks' notice. So I would request that this request be made of home TV to provide a skeleton crew for the senior task force meeting next Tuesday. According to the home TV operating policies and procedures, we can make this request.
Fabulous.
We will absolutely follow up on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
I apologize, Thursday, because the manager's out tomorrow.
Okay. Any other board member comments or announcements? Seeing none, the last agenda item this evening is to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by trustee Wilson,
Second.
supported by trustee McCurtis. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting stands adjourned at 9:01 PM.
Okay,